Take a look behind the curtain with a real whistleblower and American patriot. Prepare to embrace the uncomfortable truth because this program has no time for comforting lies. Here is civil liberties enthusiast, Second Amendment defender, and recovering FBI agent Kyle Seraphin.
Well, hello, my friends, and welcome to the Kyle Seraphin Show. Today is Tuesday. It is March the 24th, and I think everything is working the way it's supposed to, although it looks like our locals channel is having some issues over on the Rumble platform. So, folks, welcome to today's bizarre situation. There was a $1 billion bet placed on the oil market, which was based on, as far as we can tell, the tweet that led off with yesterday's show, or the Truth, I guess. True Social has a slightly different name for it. We're going to be talking about business as usual. And we had another moment of business as usual, insider trading, people taking over and using government to enrich themselves. This is not a new concept. But we did get to see a couple examples. Number one was somebody profited about $1.5 billion off an oil market speculation within a few moments prior to Donald Trump's post, which calmed the fears of the oil markets by a lot temporarily. Those have since gone back. The second is that Markwayne Mullin, the senator from Oklahoma, was sworn in, was confirmed as the DHS secretary in kind of an unusual move with very little fanfare and not a particularly contentious confirmation hearing, which is kind of new. Because if you remember, anybody that the so-called deep state or anybody that the administrative state or people that are in government really wanted to see not in government, they fought it tooth and nail. And you can always tell who's a problem by who their enemies are and what the other side is willing to fight over. And there wasn't much of a fight over Markwayne Mullin. It tells me that we're going to see plenty of business as usual, major contracts going to large companies that make safety equipment that doesn't actually necessarily make you safe, but they do spend a lot of government money on it. I think we'll see a lot of that, as you guys are pointing out in the chat. The scapegoat, Markwayne Mullin. And I don't know why this keeps happening, but every time I close this window over here, it makes our camera system get really, really small. So hopefully I can do it like this. All right. If you guys are watching, we're doing a road show. I'm in Arizona right now, so I'm recovering from a 16-hour drive, and we're going to do the best we can with what we've got. I think it's going to all work out okay. I think I've got everything in place. Kind of interesting. I'm challenging myself this year to not just stay in my little studio where I'm comfortable and take the show on the road so that I don't have to just be in one place at one time. All right. All of that is to say, yeah, of course, all the things I just did are all jacked up now. You guys can't make this thing up. 1 second here while I fix the video. I have no idea. I'm going to be off screen on this, but here you go. Let's read for Patriot Protective, the sponsor of today's program right now. And we're in the middle of tax season, which is one of the worst stretches for data breaches the country's ever seen. In the last 90 days, government contractors have handled Medicaid and benefits for 46 states. They got hit with ransomware. Over 25 million Americans had their social security numbers, their medical records, their home addresses stolen. Texas Attorney General called it potentially the largest data breach in American history. We have Panera Bread exposing 5 million customers, Under Armour, 72 million email addresses dumped into a hacking forum, and all of this on top of a record-setting 2025 where we saw over 3,200 data breaches in a single year. It matters right now because at tax season, you do have money that's at stake, potentially money that the government's holding on to for you, because that's the way that our system works. Having that stolen means you could lose your tax return. You also could lose your refund before you ever see it. IRS flagged over 2 million returns for identity fraud last year. If it happens to you, the average rate to get it resolved is well over 2 years. Shocking. Our government doesn't do things well. If you guys want to protect yourself, the one way you can do it is get your name out of the data broker websites, the people search websites that are out there publishing all of your information. Go to patriot-protect.com/KYLE, patriot-protect.com/Kyle. You'll save 15% on an annual subscription to their search and destroy protocol. Guys, you can protect yourself before you end up becoming a victim. That's kind of the way to do it. A little ounce of prevention versus a pound of cure. Get yourself squared away with some version of scraping your name out of these broker websites that are trying to serve things up to scammers in a nasty way. Patriot-protect.com/KYLE, 15% off annual subscriptions. Let's see if I can find the button to dive into today's program right now. All right, I think we got it. Now is the question, am I going to be able to? No, I'm going to have to resize. So if you guys will bear with me a little bit, I actually have a bunch of stories I want to cover, one of which is the Blaze Pipebomber story. And I'm tempted to start there only because it's more personal. It's my buddy Steve Baker's story. And it seems like something that we should be really well aware of. If you guys have been following our coverage of this story, it is maybe one of the worst, most public examples of how our government really has no scruples, none whatsoever, that they're willing to jam up what looks to be an innocent man. And there's a pretty good story that was done by Joe Hanneman, Steve Baker. I had a friend, Viva Fry, give me some credit the other day for being part of this as well. And I don't think I'm really part of the story other than I'm going to keep talking about it. There we go. Now we've got it sized out properly. All right, so let's talk about it right here. Brian Cole Jr.'s physical appearance, his posture, his mannerisms, his gait, his movements in the world, they do not match the FBI's hoodie-clad pipe bomb suspect. This is the story just published by The Blaze. This is an update to their story that's gone out since this is under their January 6th heading. This is updated yesterday. And I've been waiting for this one for quite a while, folks. I'm going to read a handful of things on it. I will link this in the show notes. So if you were to go to the comments over on Rumble, if you go to the comments on YouTube, you're going to be able to find these things. We'll put them over on locals as well. Video analysis shows a stark physical difference between Cole, that's Brian Cole Jr., and the FBI's original unknown subject in the pipe bombing case. Despite his reported confession for placing explosives at two sites on the Capitol Hill, January 5th, 2021, that's where this story goes back to, Brian Cole Jr.'s physical dimensions, his posture, his gait, and his mannerisms are at stark odds with the video clips that we've seen for years. 5 years of the hoodie-clad pipe bomb subject. And by the way, I use the word subject interchangeably with suspect because the FBI uses the term subject of investigation. Suspect is like a police term. You know, it's like a cop term, which the FBI isn't, which I was not. They're not good cops being cops. Anyhow, full analysis of the hoodie-wearing suspect has been complicated by poor quality video, manipulated video frame rates, black and white images, cropping of the original footage, substandard video. However, they still give you some clues into the allegations that Cole was the bomber. A couple of major things in this story. Number one, we're going to talk about physical size, but they're breaking it out essentially in the terms his walking. He has a different stride. He has a different posture in the world. His body shape is not the same. His features don't match. The shoe size is really, really critical. This feels like an OJ thing. Like if the hand, if the glove doesn't fit, if the shoe doesn't fit, you must acquit sort of attitude. And there's a problem with the way this plays out. His shoe size is between a 12 and a 12 and a half. That's from measuring using the bricks and the pavement that he was actually standing on in videos that you can go see. Now, they've also followed up with the family. I know for a fact that his shoe size is a 12. But even just using sort of like the technology or the tactics that would be available to a journalist, you can go and look at it. And without knowing who the person was in the video, you can see that it's a 12 to 12 and a half. You can measure this out. The problem is the pipe bomber suspect had a size 9 to 9 and a half. Now, you could theoretically wear bigger shoes, fill them with socks, and be able to pretend to have bigger shoes to throw off somebody who was trying to do video analysis. But it'd be pretty hard for someone with a size 12 foot to cram themselves into a size 9 or 9 and a half. And for what reason? And then wander around for 45 minutes on foot. Just want you to keep that in the back of your heads. All right, Cole, 31 of Woodbridge, Virginia, won't be back in district court in Washington, D.C. until April the 21st for a status hearing on the 2 explosives-related felony charges that have kept him behind bars since his arrest on December the 4th. Again, most of you guys did not want to see us run away from the story. I certainly have not. He's awaiting a ruling from the U.S. Court of Appeals on his challenge. The detention order is keeping him behind bars until that trial. Here's a picture of Brian Cole on the screen right now. You can see he wears glasses. He has kind of a childish face, even though he's 31 years old. And then you can see that they brought, for the interrogation room, this is a interrogation done in one of the field office. I think this is actually in the interrogation room at Washington Field where I used to work. That looks like a pretty familiar table. I've sat in the chair just to where Brian Cole's sitting over to the left. You've got food, snack food, and stuff like that. They were trying to make him comfortable, I suppose. So there you have that. All right. FBI says that after 2 hours of denying involvement in the pipe bomb case, Cole suddenly gave a detailed confession on the December 4th interrogation. His defense team, however, has retorted that the appeals court is seeking to contest each of the government's factual claims. These have been broken out by Armitage over on X, but by Steve Baker, by Joe Hanneman, and it's been going on for quite a while. They've been pointing out that this is not playing. The stuff that they said, the things that they're accusing him of, it just does not work. Part of it is because of the timeline of the buys. There's also factual information that he doesn't know. There's some really interesting stuff in this story that you may not be able to pull out unless you kind of know the story to begin with. So I want to highlight this one as well. One of the most glaring conflicts in the case is that there was an eyewitness who described the hoodie suspect as being a white male and Cole is black. Many of you may not know that. But Brian Cole Jr. was arrested despite the fact that people, how can I say this without giving this away too much? People who were known to the FBI that were involved in this investigation knew, absolutely knew, because they walked by the pipe bomber subject at night, knew that, in fact, we were talking about someone who was a white person. And Loudermilk actually brought that up. And so there's some links in this document, in this this story, that you guys can find. You'll go through and click through if you want to see Barry Loudermilk, who's now leaving. He's going to not run for office again. He actually steps up and says it in this in one of their subcommittee hearings. And he says, did the FBI struggle to identify a subject because they were too busy worrying about whether or not the person that they found, this black guy, was white, based on a witness who walked by the subject. And that witness is someone that is well known to the FBI. Guys, I'm watching my chat right now. For whatever it's worth here, let's put it on the screen. Just take a quick break moment. There's a question about whether or not there's an issue on Rumble. And I don't know what the answer is. But we had some struggles yesterday. I'm sitting at my dad's house right now. I'm working out of my parents' house. And he was unable to get Rumble to activate. He couldn't get on. He couldn't log onto the chat. All of it was broken down. So if you're struggling with that and it's not working, join us on YouTube. Easy option. It's also running over on Facebook without any problems. It also runs live on X. You guys can do it over there. Let me see if I can figure out what's going on with this Rumble story. It says everything's waiting on it, but it's not running. Tell you what, we'll take a quick breather here. Let me see if I can add this. Rumble claiming that it's on my end. It looks like it's working, but kind of interesting that it's not. Let me open this thing up here and see what's going on. And look for live streams. Kind of interesting when we're going to be talking about some of the malfeasance that's going on to watch it not pop up. What's that all about, huh? I'm clicking through and everything looks like it should be good on my end here. Live streaming. How about that? Live streams. Waiting for stream. All right. I'm going to do my best to update this in real time while we're doing it. And then we may have to upload the video again. If you guys are watching and you're seeing some weird stuff and turns out it cuts off, so be it. We'll fix it. We'll get it put back up. Okay, I'm going to turn Rumble back on. It said it was going on my end, so all that's pretty strange. Maybe we'll see something different. All right, I'm going to continue on. If you guys are watching on one of the inferior platforms, unfortunately, Rumble, which is the only quote-unquote free speech platform that we have, it really is inferior. And it doesn't do a great job necessarily. So be it. Join us over on YouTube if you can. You'll see what's going on. All right. So in addition to Barry Loudermilk calling out the fact that the original information, 2 eyewitnesses, here it is. The FBI's operational updates note 2 eyewitnesses who described the gray hoodie suspect as a white male. Did that influence the FBI's investigation, and specifically did it keep them away from finding a black guy who, as we pointed out on this program a number of times, he was doing quite a few different things. There's a pretty good chance that he was driving at the time when he was supposed to be on foot. That seems problematic. He was buying things for the bomb in an illogical order, and there was no way that he could have known what the outcome of the election was going to be, so he was theoretically building bombs for a future election problem that hadn't happened just yet. There are 3 parts to this story. The first part was published January the 16th. The second was on February the 6th. This is the third part. The autism disclosure gives us some information. There's an OCD diagnosis, which explains a lot of his compulsive behavior, which has nothing necessarily to do with guilt, and it started 18 months after the pipe bombing placement. This is where they start getting into some of their analysis of what your body does in time and space. If you guys don't know, you can look at people walk through the door, and sometimes you'll know just by the way that they sound. I've talked about it. My kids, I can tell you the difference of the sound of a running kid above me. We all have a different way of moving through time and space, and this story is pointing at some of it. I'm going to put some of it on the screen right now. So one of them is the way that we move in our arms and our legs, the way that our body proportions are set up, our torso versus our legs. And so they did a lot of this analysis over at Blaze. You guys are seeing some of it. It's worth actually just going over there and checking out about it. But the way that our feet land, if you've ever watched anybody move, and I've been working on my daughters right now because I used to have a kind of a strange, kind of my toes would kick outward, and it's not necessarily the most efficient movement. So you can train yourself to walk or run so that your footsteps, if you were to, let's say, see them in the sand on a beach, that they're not kicked out or kicked in, but they are in fact straight directly in front of you. You can train yourself to do that. A lot of runners do it for efficiency and so on. But when people just walk naturally and they've never thought about how they move, they may have a specific way about how they move their feet, both off the ground and then when they place it down. And this is some of the stuff that's being called out in this particular piece. An outward foot angle. This is Brian Cole Jr. His head and his body lean slightly to the left as he moves around. His torso leans slightly forward. The rear end protrudes. This is just the way that your skeleton sort of balances on your feet. And he's 5'6". His feet appear disproportionately large to his body. A guy who's 5'6" and has like clown feet of a size 12. That's really big. The pipe bomber, however, is much more evenly proportioned, has an inward foot angle, and steps in a crossover manner. In other words, that the midline is crossed over when the feet are done. This is closer to what you might find on someone who's a runner, because they try to correct and keep things running over the stop of the same center of gravity. A straight trunk, square shoulders, 5'7" is the height that's estimated from the videos, and the feet appear to be proportionate for the height. Hence, the FBI said 5'7", size 9. Some of these things are non-negotiable, because you can sit and look at somebody and go, that's not the right guy. By the way, members of the FBI, friends of mine who are living in the neighborhood of this guy, have said similar things, because they saw this person walking around and went, there's no chance. That's not how he walks. There's a comment in here about some professionals who have done some gait analysis. There's some discussion about the American Psychiatric Association and the way that autism both manifests physically, socially, in communication. It's worth reading just some of this. And then the observations. There's 48 minutes of body cam footage that was non-pipe bomb related. It was simply a Prince William County police officer and Brian Cole Jr. talking, and you can see things like he holds his phone up to his face because he's severely nearsighted. The way that he holds his phone, the way that you hold your phone, is specific and unique. You do it all the time, whether you know it or not. And then we can see the way that the pipe bomber in the video holds the phone, and it is quite different. In any case, this story is far from over, so many of you are asking the question like, hey, what's going on with it? Why is it there are no updates? The fact is that the defense team is still working over and over again. If you guys want to watch some of these videos, there's a bunch of stuff that's over on Vimeo, and I'm not going to show them all today because a lot of them are without any kind of audio context. But you'll be able to see side-by-sides and then AI mapping of essentially the long bones, the major anchor points. So humerus, your radius and ulna have a certain length. The spine, the distance from like your clavicle down to your pelvic girdle, the femur, right? Your tib and your fib and your lower leg and the length of your feet. Those are all fixed and can be estimated as you move around. And once you have a couple of anchor points using AI, you can create these kind of like skeleton color maps. And that's what you're seeing on the screen. And that's what Blaze did. So it'll be really interesting for those of you who are curious. You can see that there's a difference in torso size. There's a difference in leg size. There's a difference in movement and all of these things. The easiest thing that all of us know about is the size of our feet. You can't fake the size of your feet. If any of you have ever tried to wear a shoe because you thought it looked good, but it didn't fit right, that doesn't last very long. And it certainly isn't going to last very long for someone who's autistic and is already, uncomfortable in the physical world and has to do certain things to make themselves feel better. So I'm not going to belabor that any further, but I did want you guys to see it. I want you to know that story, I think, is worth your time. And again, it'll be available to you as you go out there and look into the comment sections on YouTube and Rumble. I don't know if our Rumble is back, by the way. No idea what's going on there. All right, I'm going to hit a couple of these stories. Mostly, I want to hit the domestic agenda. And the domestic agenda that I talked about yesterday, this is Agenda 47. These are the promises that were made. This is going to be the thing that makes or breaks the midterms for Republicans. It's going to make whether or not you're going to have Donald Trump have some ability to operate for the next 2 years, starting in 2027, or whether or not it's going to just be, sort of fending off attacks left and right. I think affordability is a big piece of it. And affordability, one of the things that people buy every single day, it ends up being a pretty decent amount of our budgets. It's gas. I saw it driving out here. Some Trump supporters in Memphis say that higher gas prices are worth the war in Iran. I saw the picture for this. This is an ABC News story. And the picture was the perfect MAGA people. And they're wearing their MAGA hats. And they're not even like the red MAGA hats. They're like some off-brand MAGA hats. It's white with like American flag letters. They praised his public safety efforts in Memphis. He went into town to tout that. So we're going to read the story real quick. Then I'm going to show you some video of like maybe the top tier knob slobbery. One of them is Stephen Miller, who's a lot more sophisticated. He's the deputy chief of staff for policy. And then the other one is Kash Patel, who is claiming his victories on basically solving crime in Memphis. And by the way, while they're solving crime in Memphis, one of the stories I saw yesterday right away was that there was a park police officer, federal officer, who was shot in Washington, D.C. So they're out there touting their wins, solving murder and all the other kind of things. And of course, like the cities that we would say are not safe, some of them just have reprieves. Donald Trump visited Memphis on Monday to join a roundtable of the Memphis Safe Task Force. The anti-crime initiative, some of his supporters in Bluff City told ABC News that they're happy with the president's actions against Iran, and they're willing to put up with some pain at the gas pump as a result. All of this tells me that the Fox News sort of talking point, that some short-term pain equals long-term gain, it is a thing. It is a success. And the reason they do those messagings on Fox News, the reason that Mark Levin goes out there and runs his mouth the way that he does, the reason that we see Trey Gowdy and Laura Ingraham try to make excuses for things that would otherwise be stuff if it was on the other shoe and a Democrat was in, that they would have been attacking, is because it is successful in shaping the minds of people who are waiting to get the talking points, who are waiting to receive the information and have a completely unskeptical worldview. If you think that Fox News is just going to tell you the truth, and that's what you need to go to, if you think that when you turn on the 5 o'clock news or the 10 o'clock news and they give you an update, then that's the way it is, then maybe that is the way it is for you. And so you're going to find people like that. I think ABC News was interested to find it. They, of course, lead with the first paragraph saying that some people thought it was okay. Other residents dissented, pointing out how it's causing challenges for them and their friends. More on that in a second. Gas prices in Tennessee are an average around $3.64 per gallon, $3.64 for regular, according to AAA. And that's up from a month ago at $2.56. Where I was in Austin, we were about $3.50 a gallon, and we were finding prices as low as $2.20. So we went up by $1.30 to $1.50, depending on what station you went to. Nationally, 55% of Americans said that their household finances had at least taken somewhat of a hit from the increase in gas prices, including 42% of Republicans. A poll found that 77% of Republicans still approve of U.S. military strikes in Iran. That means that, 23% of Republicans and I imagine a good chunk of independents are not really that keen on it. So they're out there still trying to push this story along. On Monday morning, a group of Trump supporters, let's see if we can find them. They gathered outside to greet on the corner where Donald Trump came in. They had signs, they had the flags, they were cheering him on for saying what the city was doing and its safety. Let's get some of that top tier knob slobbery coming from Stephen Miller. Maybe Donald Trump thinks that what he's doing is such a success because he's got people like this telling him how great it is. By the way, Trump takes the compliment, turns around, looks at Kash Patel and says, now let's see if you can do better. And then Kash Patel tries to outdo it, even though he's kind of an inferior speaker. Let's listen to two knob slobbers within the Trump administration.
The work that President Trump is doing, not only in Memphis, not only in Washington, D.C., but all over the country, ultimately, it will save and is saving tens of thousands of American lives. It is, I'll use that word again, what President Trump has done on border security and public safety is a national miracle that will be studied not only for generations, but for centuries to come. Thank you, President Trump.
Thank you, Steve. So, Kash, see if you can top that. I don't know. That's a tough one, Kash.
That is tough. You know, Mr. President, as I look around this venue, I see and I'm reminded again why we have the greatest warriors on God's green earth, the men and women serving in uniform, the men and women serving and wearing the badge, and law enforcement, our police, our sheriffs around the state of Tennessee. I'm reminded that Americans exist to protect this country day in and day out, and they've done it like we've done it here. But what we didn't have was you. We didn't have a commander-in-chief who backed the blue, who resourced the blue, who funded the military, who did whatever it takes to safeguard every single life. And here in Memphis, Tennessee, you have put on a show for the world. You have allowed us to go out there and capture gangbangers, rapists, murderers, drug dealers at record historic levels. And for me, a first-generation Indian-American kid whose parents fled a genocide in East Africa to become the 9th director of the FBI, I'm living the wildest dream you could possibly imagine, sir. But it's thanks to you. But more importantly, what I see when I look out across our great partners here in the interagency and our great legislatures and our great prosecutors and our great attorney general who has the guts to go out there and make arrests, turn them into prosecutions and put people in prison, you are giving that dream to every single child in the state of Tennessee. You are inspiring the nation and law enforcement to come up and wear the badge and wear the colors of this country and safeguard our men and women for generations to come. This is an enduring mission, Mr. President, because you have made it enduring.
There's only so much of that I can take. What does Donald Trump specifically have to do with local law enforcement? You might ask yourself that question because maybe you've been in local law enforcement and you thought, you know what, the president of the United States has very little to do with it. It turns out that's actually the correct answer. There's almost nothing that the president has to do with local law enforcement. It's just not relevant. And you listen to the litany of people that Kash Patel was praising. The one thing that I keyed in on is he mentioned the fact that he's an Indian American. Apparently you can't say that. Yeah, you can't say that Kash Patel comes from Indian descent. By mentioning that, it turns out that's bigoted. So how dare he? Why do you say that? Why do I say that? Oh, it's because it's actually mentioned in a lawsuit where Kash Patel's girlfriend, Kash Patel's girlfriend, one of them is involved in writing up a bunch of their screeds and their complaints. And the complaint is that I mentioned the fact that he's Indian by descent, which he is, which is what he just told the president. Apparently you can't say that kind of stuff. Against the backdrop of them going to Memphis to celebrate, I cannot help but see that a U.S. Park police officer was shot in Washington, D.C. Officer was transported to a local hospital yesterday. That happened right under the nose of where the White House was. They weren't there. So maybe if Donald Trump had been in D.C., we wouldn't have these kind of things happening. And I don't mean to make light of this. I'm just saying that to act like these cities are now permanently fixed, it's ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense. This is not the way that it actually works. Oh, they're stealing my article from me. Let me get rid of this thing. Let's read the story. The circumstances of the shooting are unclear. Park Police spokesperson said it was a non-life-threatening injury. Attorney General Pam Bondi said she's spoken to Muriel Bowser, that the police chief there was briefed on the shooting. They pray for the officer's recovery. Yeah, I think that's a totally reasonable thing. We should all do that. I remember the Park Police was shot in the community. The officer was taken by helicopter to a local hospital. The story here, which I think is much broader, is that you can't solve murder. You can't solve hatred. You can't make people not be racist. You can't make people not be bigoted. You can't make people not do violence. There's just crappy people. This is like the nature of being in a fallen world. And so this claim, which I think is completely illogical, that we're dealing with a president that has stopped murder and dropped this, and we have historically low, while we had the exact same claims and the trends are exactly the same that they were under Biden. I don't know if these guys just took a pill and stopped paying attention, or if they're really that just disingenuous. If they were just looking for fault when the other team was up, and as soon as their guy is there, like the only way that you can function is to stroke ego. But it's really bizarre to watch. It's one of the saddest things to watch too, actually, because if you were honest, then we could celebrate your wins and we would go, okay, yeah, that's like, I know you're being honest because you're sharing details that may cut against what you're trying to point out. And when you give people all the information, you're like, here's what's going on. Here's some exculpatory information. Here is some incriminating information. This is what we're supposed to be doing, by the way, when you do investigations and you bring it in front of a jury. You're supposed to give them all the information. It's like, here's the facts. The facts are what they are. If the facts support that somebody did something, no big deal. One of Trump's promises under Agenda 47 was to end weaponized government. The key understanding of weaponized government is that there's a preconceived notion of what the answer is going to be, and the government is going to work to get to the answer that serves them. That's what weaponization looks like. It's when it stops dealing in facts and it starts dealing in outcomes. It doesn't just care about what the process is, it cares about how it ends up as well. These guys have decided that they're going to go out and message numbers. I see it every single day. I get alert updates on X every single time Kash Patel posts, and it's dozens of times a day. And they're all based on numbers, and they're all without context. And they're all completely unskeptical of the fact that they would have said that these things were garbage if Joe Biden was in, that these things were underreported, that the cities themselves are incentivized to not report crime and not report statistics that make them look bad. And they're taking credit for it. Completely unskeptically. If I'd seen just a little bit of, we previously said this, and here's how this is how we can defeat the argument that the cities are not actually giving us information, maybe we could listen to it. But as it stands, it's really, really hard to watch for me. That's just my take on it. As I look at it, and I want there to be less crime. I want there to be success in law enforcement. I also want you to give credit to local law enforcement because they're the ones that are actually in the community. Every single time I talk to FBI agents offline, and that's fairly frequently, they will all acknowledge that you cannot do the job that the FBI wants to take credit for without the locals doing their job. In fact, if the locals, the task force officers, if that federal, local, or state partnership goes away, it's the end of the FBI's mission. They no longer are going to be able to be successful. And they certainly can't take any credit. We can go back to like the movie Die Hard in the 90s. It goes way back before that, of course. But there are plenty of instances that are even dramatized in like Hollywood type presentations where there's this animosity between federal law enforcement and the locals in the states because the impression is that the feds come in and they take credit. And then you go and watch these Twitter feeds. You go watch the social media posts that are constantly being updated. And you know for a fact that it's happening. Because Steve Friend, if you guys are our regular Friendly Friday guest, Steve Friend has an entire account that basically debunks this all day long. He will go in, read the press release where the FBI director is touting success, and you find out that the FBI didn't do the arrest, didn't do the investigation, didn't do the initial stop, didn't do the initial incarceration, didn't do the searches, didn't find anything, and then they turned around and they did a superseding charge at the federal level and then claimed credit like they were the heroes. This is a regular story, and those of you who've worked in law enforcement know exactly what I'm talking about. It'll be a traffic stop of somebody that was doing some sort of, lane changing and weaving, and then they'll find out that there's a ton of drugs in there, and then they'll go and they'll incarcerate the guy, and they'll take the drugs and they'll seize it, and they'll start with a state charging document, and the feds come in and they add stiffer charges, and it benefits local law enforcement to have stronger charges because maybe they have a DA that's weak, so they'll go to the federal system, but then the feds take all the credit. It's just regular stuff that happens. And it's really disappointing for those that want to see actual change, that really wanted to see someone come in and reform the agency, not just turn the image away from what the FBI was doing badly, pointing it towards, they do transactional, crime stats. They've always done this stuff. It's just a slap in the face. Here's another good slap in the face. We talked quick about affordability. There are people that are seeing the problem in Memphis. There are people that are going to say that the short-term pain is worth it. They're literally taking the Fox News point that was out there. We played you a montage last week of people saying it over and over again. That repetition works. It's the illusory truth effect. If you hear it enough times, you start believing that it's probably true. It's not even your opinion. Like, I don't know anybody that goes to the gas station and starts thinking like, oh, what am I supposed to think? It's just what they've heard. They're like, well, this is worth it because we're solving some kind of problem. So you're seeing from CBS News, the Iran war wages as oil and stock markets grapple with conflicting messages from Trump and from Tehran. Quick and dirty. Here's what happened. Donald Trump released a message saying that there was going to be a ceasefire on the U.S. side, that the Iranians had come to the table. Not long afterwards, the Iranians pushed back and said, nah, we never said that. Donald Trump came and offered us something. And all of the while, there were some bets that were made on the stock market that made somebody make a bunch of money. I'm going to go to this Axios story real quick, too, because this is also sort of related. When I say that the status quo is undefeated and that the more things change, the more we end up seeing the same thing, this is a great example of it. Marco Rubio has to testify in a friend's trial over potentially doing illegal lobbying. This is a Venezuela oil deal. So I'm going to read that. This is from Mark Caputo. Axios, we're told, is where Donald Trump goes for news first thing every morning. Before we do all that, let me just say, if you guys are watching on Rumble, make sure you give us a like. I don't know what the hell's going on over there, but it is a frustrating platform to work with. They regularly don't update thumbnails, and there's a bunch of back-end headaches. So if you're seeing that and you want to join us on YouTube too, or just make sure you have a backup over on YouTube, I'd appreciate that. Subscribe to the channel over YouTube. We're just shy of 20,000 subscribers over there and growing. Significantly more growth on YouTube is capable than we are on Rumble for whatever reason. In theory, the free speech platform should be great, but it doesn't actually work that way. Spotify, you guys can find us in the audio and the video all after the fact. It's KyleSeraphinShow.com. I don't have a slide for it, but you guys can see it, KyleSeraphinShow.com. Go follow us on Spotify. Give us a comment over there. A lot of angry people yesterday telling me that Chuck Norris was pro-Israel, as though that had something to do with how I felt about Chuck Norris when I was a kid. There was a lot of like interesting, aggressive comments. Leave them. I'm happy to see them. I don't mind if people will have some dissent. This is a good place to do it. And you may hear an ad from Spotify right there. So check those out. Okay, so we're going to continue on. Let's do the Marco Rubio bit here. Read the story from Axios. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is scheduled to testify. That's going to be today in the federal criminal trial of former U.S. Representative David Rivera. He's representative out of Florida, a longtime friend, an ally, a former housemate. He's accused of secretly lobbying for the Venezuelan government. What's interesting is you have a Secretary of State who was involved in doing some of this stuff, and now he's going to go and try to help his buddy out, who is on trial by the government that Rubio theoretically represents. I'm going to pull this up so we can get rid of the... if you guys want to see how to do this, if you never use this, removepaywall.com is really nice if there's ever an article that you want to be able to read and not have to worry about... there we go. We're going to archive it real quickly. If you ever need to be able to find something, a New York Times article that someone sent you and you can't read it and you wanted to see it, this is the way you do it. I always use these little kind of ticks, and you can also go to the archives back there. The Internet Archives is archive.ph. So here we go. Let's read a little bit more of the story. Why it matters. Only in Miami, this trial sheds light on an unseemly world. This is where it gets fun because we're going to have another story about this in just a second. Shadowy, big dollar, foreign influence. Efforts to influence Latin America. It underscores how politically toxic Rivera has been to Rubio's career. He was asked as a prosecution witness after it became clear that Rivera's team had planned to call him as a defense witness. Potentially embarrassing for the secretary, three sources told Axios. So they wanted to get him in. The fact that we have a member of the cabinet in talking about while we are still, is he still running Venezuela? Is that kind of what we're told? It's kind of wild to watch. So there he is. This is where I think it got real crazy. Because as we're hearing about the potential for scam, for grift, for people illegally lobbying, this story is at CNBC. Volume in stock and oil futures surge minutes before Trump's market turning post. I led with this. This is a minor story on all the major networks. ABC, NBC, CBS, they're all lightly covering it. I've got a couple little pieces on it. Some people went on to the meta coverage of it under the poly markets. This is kind of like just the brass tacks of it. Around 6:50 a.m. in New York, the S&P 500 E-mini futures trading on CME recorded a sharp and isolated jump in volume. There's a similar pattern observed in the oil markets. Roughly 15 minutes later at 7:05, Donald Trump posted a market-moving announcement about Iran on Truth Social. That's the quick of it. Here's what we're looking at on the, there's a graph, which is also in our thumbnail. With thin liquidity typical in early trading hours, the sudden burst stood out as one of the largest volume movements in the session up to that point. You guys can see the huge jump right there. A similar pattern was observed in the oil markets. West Texas immediate May futures saw a noticeable pickup in trading activity about roughly the same time, with a distinct volume spike interrupting otherwise quiet conditions. You're seeing the, if you're watching on the screen, you guys are seeing the graphs here. This will be included in the show notes, or the show comments rather. Roughly 15 minutes later, Donald Trump said that the U.S. and Iran had held talks and that it was halting planned strikes on Iranian power plants and energy infrastructure. That announcement prompted an instant rally in risk assets, and the S&P 500 soared more than 2.5% before the opening bell. West Texas Intermediate futures dropped nearly 6% following the announcements. There's the announcement we had. It was in yesterday's thumbnail as well, from Donald Trump, 7:05 yesterday morning. All right. The timing of the earlier volume spiked across both equities and crude caught the attention of traders. And this is, I think, the point, is that people don't even care anymore. There was probably a time when this would have gone unnoticed, and it certainly would have gone unreported. But there are more people with more access to be able to see things than ever before. This is why 2003 level propaganda is going to fall flat. Except for the few people in Memphis that are willing to pick up the Fox News talking point. Early morning futures, typically less liquid, in which case they can make short bursts of buying and selling more noticeable than during regular trading hours. Still, the trades raised some eyebrows because whoever purchased a large amount of stock futures and sold or shorted crude futures at that moment made a lot of money, like $1.5 billion, with $192 million worth of movement. So all of that is to tell you, we're talking about somebody who had access to significant funds, either had a significant amount of credit or actually had a lot of liquid assets to be able to put in. And they were able to make 10x what we think Nancy Pelosi has probably made in her decades and decades of trading. There's only a few people who would have known that Donald Trump was going to make that announcement. So the narrow pool of people who would have been able to do it would be the Trump family, people in and around Trump that were there. So anyone, maybe Secretary of War, a couple of others. It's not a very large group. This would be an easy investigation to go and figure out who was involved. The story that's coming from CNN Politics, Trump's suspiciously timed announcements on Iran. So they go into this. They're talking about a big red line. The fact that he was trying to basically subvert his own deadline. Donald Trump recently reversed a big red line in Iran, prompting some to question exactly what is motivating his wartime decision-making. On Saturday evening, Donald Trump said Iran had 48 hours to either open up the Strait of Hormuz and unshackle the global economy, or he would strike their biggest power plants. On Monday morning, he said he would give them 5 more days, citing improved negotiations in Tehran. Of course, the ceasefire announcements that was out there. Iran denied any dialogue with Washington. And while there's certainly some reason not to take those officials at their words, the diverging stories and Trump's own credibility problems, which I think are actually not just on the left where you would expect them, but there are people on the right that are now seeing them, especially when the guy has decided to completely abandon Agenda 47, the pieces of it that we've been pointing out, and the fact that they actually took it off the internet and tried to scrub it down the minute that these Iranian strikes started. That seems problematic. That actually would add credibility problems on the side that would otherwise say, yeah, that's fake news if you're talking about his credibility. They've opened the possibility there's something else is motivating him to back down, including possible fears that such a move could escalate the war and the global economic pain. And of course, you'd have a real problem in the midterms if you keep this thing up. It's difficult to prove, but the decision follows the undeniable Trump pattern. His announcements often seem conveniently ties to the open and close of financial markets. They're slightly dancing around the edges here at CNN. You guys can read that story a little further if you want. This is Polymarket talking about it, CBS News story, and it's only under their Money Watch spot. This was something that was dropped after the news day yesterday, even though this was known early on. Polymarkets is moving to quash insider trading as prediction markets face scrutiny on whether or not some people are using or drawing from classified or other closely-held information, gaining an edge on the betting events. We have regulations when it comes to stock, and theoretically there are laws that are supposed to stop insider trading. But Polymarket is widely unregulated. And so the places where people are going, these are, if you guys are not familiar with this, there's essentially a culture of proposition gambling where people can bet on events that happen in the world. If you watch the movie Rounders, you hear these guys talking about whether or not, you know, cowboys used to sit and they'd see two birds on a fence and they would make a bet based on which bird they thought was going to leave the fence line first and fly off. And then maybe they've got a buddy over there who throws something nearby or, you know, pops up and kicks a rock and it might be closer to one bird or the other. And so there's always been people trying to game what looks like they could be chance or random events. Well, this adds a new layer to it. When you have classified information, or maybe you actually know what sort of announcements are going to be made from official governmental positions, and you have this unregulated place where you can go in, drop money somewhat anonymously, and then get paid out on it in a big way. And there's a lot of money that's at stake. You know, which cabinet member is going to leave first? Who's going to make the following announcements? Who's going to speak first? This person or this person? And what will it be on? Will gas prices go here or there? These kind of things. Big, major movements and major payouts in a kind of an unregulated space. It's like a casino, but it's across the across the interwebs. The New York-based company said Monday that it's updated its rules to prohibit trades based on stolen confidential information or illegal tips. I don't know how that's going to play out either. Polymarket also clarified that traders cannot place a bet if they, quote, hold a position of authority or influence that may influence the outcome of certain events. For example, CEO of a public company would not be allowed to trade on a market that focuses on how many times they will use a certain word during an earnings call with Wall Street analysts. The Polymarket rules, which are now posted under Market Integrity page, are going to apply to the company's U.S. exchanges and their offshore operations. There's another one called Kalshi, Kalshi. There's a lot of money in wagering. Again, these are all proposition gambling type positions, but it opens up sort of a new sort of meta market for insider trading type capabilities. All that is to say that if somebody's able to get an angle on anybody, it sounds like they'll do it. And when I look at this piece here, and I'm going to go to the business as usual bit, just so we can kind of hear it, because that was the New York Times assessment of Mark Wayne Mullin. Some things, like the more that they change, the more the technology is updated, the more they end up staying the same. So we're going to do that. And then we're going to get into the discussion, because Joe Kent, who I think has been a disruptor and probably would have been a really good, interesting bet on the Polymarket piece, went on and spoke to my favorite, Mark Levin. We're going to play actual Mark Levin clips here, which are horrifically bad. And kind of the more things change, the more they stay the same. For the last decade, there's been this sort of habit that if somebody gets on the wrong side of Donald Trump, he goes out there and attacks them, attacks their family, attacks their history, and he completely ignores the history that existed before that. He'll act like the things that he said previously didn't even happen, rewrites history, and nobody seems to call it on the MAGA side. The problem is that MAGA side is ever shrinking. This story is one of those things where this is always the way it's been. Insiders get moved into insider positions. If you believe that we have selections and not elections, if you start having this instinct that the swamp sort of favors itself, the status quo is undefeated, this story about the Senate, it makes perfect sense. We had a pretty contentious move that almost out of the blue, despite all of the other sort of malperformers inside the Trump administration, we had Kristi Noem disappear as a DHS secretary, and she got about a year in the job. And one of the reasons why nobody wanted to get rid of anybody in the Trump administration was this contentious problem of Senate confirmation. Democrats, because of the narrow razor and the fact the Senate's broken, you guys can go back to the 17th Amendment for that. The Senate has been broken for a long time. It just used to always play nice with each other. Well, shockingly, a senator from Oklahoma was able to easily get confirmed, even though it was much more contentious than it used to be. They didn't used to fight this as long. He didn't have that razor thin 49-51 margin to be able to be confirmed. So this was done yesterday. And this is not a major story, apparently. Oh, now I got to go put this behind the paywall thing, too. Hold on one second here. I actually thought I had all these things done, and it looks like I did not. So we'll grab it in real time. All right, so Mark Wayne Mullin went up in front of Senate confirmation. We played a little bit. He did a kind of a lackluster and sort of unimpressive confirmation hearing. He got contentious with Rand Paul. Some of you may have seen those somewhere else. But essentially, he said some pretty nasty things, said he understood why Rand Paul's neighbor wanted to beat him up and that he didn't like him. And then he makes no apologies. He also said some pretty funny, like Oklahoma things, like, I'm never going to be the smartest guy in the room. And people are nodding along going like, yeah, no, we know. We know, brother. You've said some pretty dumb things. If you guys have heard the fun clip, he was on the same program, the Benny Johnson show, that I was, and he used the term scapegoat, which is not a thing. Although I guess it could be because it's Oklahoma. All right. Anyway, he was confirmed, and he's going to succeed Kristi Noem there at Homeland Security with a 54-45 vote, mostly along party lines, but not nearly as dangerous as it was previously. The vote comes as the Homeland Security is at the center of a massive funding impasse. They've got hours-long lines in a lot of airports. We covered that yesterday. There's a nationwide push. And by the way, there are dozens of stories over on Daily Wire who seems like a regime cheerleader right now. There's a reason why I don't go to certain outlets during this time. I tend to go to opposition type outlets more than anything else. That's my normal move. And the reason why is because I'm only going to people that are going to say the things that I like, that I'm not challenging my own assumptions. There's a reason why every morning I want to go to ABC, NBC, CNN, CBS. I go to the New York Times. I touch Axios because it's kind of in there. And then I end up with sort of like a variety of random things. One of the interesting little stuff that I didn't talk about earlier, but I have kind of some background knowledge on, that Blaze story is going to be a problem for the administration, and we're going to see some debunks. And I would not be shocked to see the Fox News types, the Daily Wires, the other people that want to throw their back out carrying water for this White House cover down on it. And when I went to Daily Wire this morning, because I was looking at it, there were like 6 stories, and they may all be written by the same guy for all I know. If you guys don't know this, a lot of these stories will be ghost written. So somebody will write the story and then they'll put, Matt Walsh or Ben Shapiro wrote it, and it's taken mostly from their commentary. It'll be from a podcast they did, but they didn't sit down and type up a story and then publish it on the website. It'll be some poor intern or some new, whatever digital media creator that listens to the podcast, generates a story based on the content of the podcast with some actual quotes, and then they put it out there. There are a lot of stories explaining how Democrats are to blame for the lines at the airport, how to get through the airport lines despite the Democrat shutdown. They're basically doing talking point work on behalf of the Trump administration, and they're carrying a lot of water for it. So when you read that stuff, it's pretty interesting. When you see this story here, which is coming from Axios, they kind of just point out that there's a Democrat demand that they curb ICE spending. They want to make sure that they get some sort of less deportations. And it sounds like there's some deals that are in the works. They're trying to get a reconciliation package through so they can get it through instead of being at the normal funding level. They want to do it at the lightest, and they're going to make it budget related. DHS would be central to the deportation agenda. That's Agenda 47, item number 2, which we've talked about here over and over again. And they're making it all about the quote unquote heavy handed tactics. 2 very different shootings, the Alex Pretty shooting and the Renee Good shooting. In any case, short story, really easily covered. Mark Wayne Mullin confirmed. This is the part that I found quite interesting, and I'm going to go to the New York Times for this. Again, I'm using the archive clip, and I'll teach you guys how to do this over on Locals if you want. We'll do a little tutorial. Congressional memo. Mullin's smooth confirmation was a throwback in the Senate. That's the heading here. It used to be that the president would be able to get their cabinet through without having to fight against any member of any party, because it wasn't about that. It was like, obviously the president's going to have advisors that are going to be from his own party. He's obviously going to get people that he likes and other people may not if you're in the opposition party, but that doesn't mean he's not entitled to have a cabinet. We've seen a change in the American political structure and the way that business as usual works because of Donald Trump. And it's not necessarily fair. I'm not a Trump is always wrong guy. He clearly showed up at a time when the other team was willing to do things. And I don't think it would have mattered if it was Donald Trump or if it was Vivek Ramaswamy in there or if it was Ron DeSantis or anybody else. If you put any Republican in the last 25 years, somebody with the GOP banner, whether they're Republican or not, because I don't think Donald Trump is a Republican. I think he's a 90s Democrat. If you put anybody that's to the right of the progressive left, then that person is literally Hitler, fascistic, xenophobic, misogynistic, take your pick of whatever the insults are. That seems to be the new politics. And it's interesting to me when Mullin is kind of like a Trump loyalist type, says a lot of kind of aggressive things that would be offensive theoretically to the hard left, and yet didn't have anywhere near the struggle of like a Tulsi Gabbard who came in at 51-49, or the RFK fight that was going on, or even the Pete Hegseth fight. The swamp, the people that just sort of mire in the muck and deep garbage of Washington, D.C., they really do seem to prefer people that they are known quantities. And I do think that's why we see incumbents stick around in this country. It's my instinct, based on seeing it happen over and over again, that if you're a known quantity and everyone knows what your problems are, it's way easier to keep you around because we've already got the opposition on you. We already know what the pain points are that we can lean on. And part of it would be like, it's better to do the devil that you know versus the devil you don't. Maybe that's the answer if you give them the most amount of credibility. But I think there's something to be said about the people that have already been in there in a position that are compromised to whatever degree they're compromised. The swamp prefers it. The machine wants to keep known quantities that are easy to deal with. And the New York Times article saying that it was a throwback, it should tell you that you're not going to get aggressive reform. You're not going to see the largest deportation operation in American history, which was the promise that was made under Agenda 47. I don't think you're going to get it. I don't think that that Mullin is representative of that. I think he's representative of a guy that's going to be representing the Washington scenario, because he had such an easy time getting through. And this could have been a thing where they could have just jammed him up for the next year. Consider that as a warning. And the New York Times sort of accidentally saying that it was a throwback in the Senate to the way they call it a reverting to a bygone tradition. Well, we don't really get that sort of nostalgia moment. I don't seem to think that people on the political left that are sitting in the Senate suddenly just went, you know what? We're better than this. We should just do the right thing. We should just confirm the president's pick because that's what we want to do. We just want to be people who can be reasonable and understand that some reasonable people will have disagreements. There's no evidence that that's the way that they operate. Facing a phalanx of fellow senators who held his nomination in their hands, Markwayne Mullin sat on the opposite side of a dais at his confirmation hearing last week and offered a promise. I'm going to work with you, he said. But most importantly, I think everybody on this dais has my personal cell phone. That cell phone isn't going to change. And if you call me, you're going to get a response. And if you text me, you're going to get a response. You know, I'm the guy you know. I'm the guy that sat next to you. And I'm the same guy with the same problems and the same access and the same connection that I had when I leave the Senate. At the end, he repeated a second time that which did not win him broad bipartisan support, but he said that he was going to continue on with the agenda of immigration. But it may have cleared the way, it says here in the New York Times, for 2 Democrats to join in, and all Republicans but one confirm him in a 54-45 vote. It's a throwback. Now, here you go. This is a good little line from it. Senator Heinrich, Martin Heinrich, one of the 2 Democrats who gave him a vote. He said, I'd like to have a secretary who I can call and have a constructive conversation with. You know, someone who would listen to me that I already know the situation on. Kind of interesting, isn't it? All of that is to say, I think that the status quo continues on. It reeks to me of that sort of problematic moment where we're not going to get change. Donald Trump was supposed to be a revolutionary figure. We talked about him being the guy that is going to outsource the revolution. And I don't think Senator Markwayne Mullin of Oklahoma is that guy. Maybe I'm being a jerk about it, but I think that's the case. And what Americans really wanted, real simply, what Americans, I almost want to do like my Oklahoma thing. What Americans want, they wanted affordability. They wanted less cronyism. They wanted less corruption. They thought that people who were quote unquote deep state actors were going to go to prison. They wanted to be able to just live in their own house and see that their lives were not slowly slaving away to a government that hated them. I think that's what Americans want. I don't think that's unreasonable. I'm going to hit that story here because the story of AI, it's going to be part of our palate cleanse as well. Who can get ahead in America? Like, where is your money? Are people really placing $1.5 billion bets to fleece you because the Donald Trump is going to make a Truth Social post somewhere? And then put in a guy who's just going to establish, the sort of status quo and keep moving along. It's hard. I got a story up here from NBC News. This is one of the best stories that I've read as far as the way they presented the information in quite a long time. I don't think I've seen anything like it quite as well. And so we're going to cover this story about affordability because you'd think that people really do care I know people care about how whether or not they can afford to survive, to live. And that this NBC story points it out graphically in a way that is absolutely damning, I think, to everything we're talking about. Let me do real quickly a quick Tucker Carlson clip. He got all this flack over the last couple of days about whether or not he loves Islam and all this other kind of stuff. I think the reason that Tucker Carlson is getting as much flack as he is because he's pointing out the administration not recovering, not bringing America back to greatness. And the consequences downstream of people feeling that the country around them is not great and that it's not the country they recognize is that they start opting out. They start looking at the possibility of being able to do the American dream, kind of move up and let your kids have like a better life than you did. If your life is materially worse than your parents' life financially, if the job market is less favorable, if the housing market is bad, I'm going to show you all those in a second, then people are opting out of having kids. And when people opt out of having kids, your civilization starts dwindling and crumbling because it doesn't have the infrastructure, it doesn't have the built-up pyramid underneath it to support the generations above it. And that is the way our system is currently built up. Listen to him talk about sort of like people's loss of faith, I think, in what America actually means. And then I'm going to show you, I think, why.
I travel so much that I see it. There's not a single Western city that's thriving. And they're all degrading in exactly the same way.
Is a lot of it just a moral decay, or is it actually true from everything?
It's a lot of things, but it's self-hatred. Every city.
Crazy.
Every European city, every American city. It's just why people lose their will to live, their will to pass on their culture, their values, their religion to their children, their will to have children. It's all gone. I mean, it's not gone with everybody, but I mean, in the cities, you really see it. It's like the people who built this are long gone and their descendants have fled and they don't care enough to keep it going. There's just a lack of self-respect that is disgusting to me, and I have contempt for it. It doesn't bother me to be hated. What really bothers me is when people hate themselves. If you hate if you hate yourself, how are you going to treat me?
That's correct.
Oh man, I don't like it. So I notice it because I travel outside the Western world, the white world. I'll just be honest, the white world. I travel a lot in the Middle East. It's amazing. It's amazing. I'm not Muslim, obviously. In fact, I'm like a Christian, flat out Christian. And my ancestors are from Europe. And so I have nothing in common on that level with the Gulf. But you go to the Gulf and it's incredible to be in a place that has pride in itself, that believes in its religion and culture, that thinks we're onto something. And this is great. Look at what we're doing. We're really proud of this. Those people are happy. They're welcoming of others. They're tolerant of diversity. Like we always talk about tolerant of diversity. There's none of that here. Are you kidding? All the whites, we love black people. Then they run and move to Bozeman because there are no black people.
Absolutely. Send their kid to the...
They hate diversity.
They hate it.
And our version of it isn't working at all. At all. So, but you go to a country like Japan or the Emirates or Qatar or Saudi Arabia, and you see that when people are self-confident, when they're really pleased with what they're doing and they believe that their system is the right system, that self-confidence results in a kind of welcoming attitude. So you'll be sitting at dinner in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and you'll say, I'm really kind of pro-Jesus, like I'm a Christian. They'll be like, oh, that's so great.
I'm going to cut away from it. This clip was running around the internet for people to say, that Tucker Carlson is now praising Islam and saying that Sharia law is a better option and that he's somehow this like Islamist type guy or an apologist for Islam and so on. And that's not what's going on. What he's recognizing is a fundamental shift that when you think you're right and you have the confidence that you believe that your culture, that your society, that your family, maybe even just your moral structure, if you walk into an argument, I've done this. I mean, I showed you this on Friday with Steve Friend. I had a reporter reach out that thought they had some inside scoop on me. And that reporter had no self-confidence. You guys can go listen to the call. All right. And it's the tail end of the show. No confidence whatsoever in what he was doing. And because he didn't generate the information, he was being asked to do something that he didn't believe in strongly, but he knew he had to go do. And so he came in weak and he got destroyed. to the point where when he got off the phone, I'm sure he went to his boss and was like, don't make me call people like Kyle Seraphin again. I have to imagine he did that. That's the phenomenon Tucker's talking about. He's not recognizing that Islam is great. He's not saying that those places are things that share his values. He's saying that they believe that they are correct. And because of that strength of belief, because they think that, we shall overcome, by the way, was a Christian spiritual for a long time and helped move people across this country. You can see that it brings a certain amount of confidence when you know that you're better. When I say no, I'll put air quotes. You believe that you're better internally and you've internalized that thing. Then the other people are not really a competition to you. So you can tolerate that. And I don't think he's necessarily wrong on that. Now, do I think that I'm going to go and hang out in Saudi Arabia? No. Tucker Carlson lives in a very different world. He's got a huge media profile. He has tons of money. He doesn't live the life that any of us do. But when you start recognizing that people who think that they are winning are going to win, that their mechanisms of doing so are assured and they're blessed by God, and that their future is rosy because of their righteousness versus where we stand today. Yesterday, we talked a little bit about that Chuck Norris attitude. It was a Cold War era. I grew up in it and I saw it and I watched it go away. Up until I was in my 20s, the people that lived in America looked at America and said, America is the best. American exceptionalism was not just something that people thought about. They lived it because they believe, and that means you can bring people in. It's like, yeah, well, of course we can handle you coming in. You're not a problem. We're awesome. You want to come be part of awesome? Sure, there's room for more awesome. Don't suck, though. Or you get people that are fighting over scraps, and they start thinking, we were awesome, we're losing awesome, we're going to have to claw to that awesome. And if you were to come in, you might actually take some of the thing that we want. The closer people are in proximity, the smaller piece of the pie they have, the more they fight for that piece of the pie. Give your kids a handful of jelly beans, like a massive fistful, and then ask them to share with their siblings. They'll do it. They don't care. It's like, I've got 100. I have no difference. 100 or 90 jelly beans is all the jelly beans I need. Give them 3 and ask them to give 1 away, where they have to cut a third of their stuff out, and watch them labor over that decision. Now we're going to do the story from NBC because that's where the labor is coming in. And I think this is truly insightful, unfortunately, and Tucker's correct about this. And it also tells us the big problem, which is why the affordability mantra, promise, Agenda 47 that Donald Trump ran on, and making America great again, aspiring to a time when we actually did think that we were the best and we had all the things, all of that won, and walking away from it loses. Here we go. There's a wealth gap in the United States, and it's at a modern day high. The richest households have been rapidly multiplying wealth over the past year. They've been buying real estate, plowing money into the stock market, including high-risk, high-reward investments because they can afford to take that loss. The returns have been sitting comfortably with new tax benefits to help them protect their gain. Again, this is NBC News. They come from sort of a communistic sort of attitude or a socialistic animal, right? But it doesn't mean that their analysis, even if they editorialize, doesn't mean they're wrong. People with a tighter budget, on the other hand, have been struggling to get ahead. Many of you may experience this thing. Many of you are not struggling to get ahead or struggling every day, but you still have a worry because you can see that sort of shadow chasing you. Prices for grocery store staples are going up. Job opportunities are decreasing. Once stable careers like those in manufacturing are shrinking. The idea of doing better than your parents for many feels increasingly out of reach. Here's a picture of what's going on. The rich are getting richer. Stock market goes up, so retirement funds are doing well. There's no struggle, says Lori in Texas. Food and rent have been increasing. The cost to do anything has been increasing. The necessities are a struggle. Nothing is going well, says Melinda in Virginia, which means other people are not keeping up. This is wild. This is such a telling graph I'm going to show you here. Excuse me, kind of like trying to scroll it correctly. Rising wealth. The wealthiest 1% of Americans have seen far greater gains over the past 25 years than the bottom 50%. I would actually like to see this graph not include the bottom 50%, because the bottom 50% are always the bottom 50%, and that's a tough place to be. I would like to see what the first 25th percentile was operating, and maybe the 25th, the 50th to 25th percentile. I want to see what the strong middle class looks like. So I wish they did that graph, but this is really telling. The top 1%, in 2000 has gone from roughly $11 trillion worth of total net worth to upwards of 50 trillion. And the bottom 50% has remained almost stagnant with minimal gains over the last 25 years. This is one of many spots where we can see this. How is the 1% growing its wealth? It's by investing heavily in the stock market. Here's where you have it. Okay, they have these graphs here. Again, this is a really, really good article. I'm actually going to make it the lead article in these in the comments for you guys to read over on YouTube and Rumble. Where $1,000 grows fastest. They show in 2021, if you put $1,000 into cash savings, you would end up with $1,127 based on the average savings account return. That used to be a real way to actually grow your money, putting them in a savings account in my lifetime. And I'm only in my 40s. Typical 401k, 60% stocks, 40% bonds, a nice, like, quote unquote, diversified portfolio for your retirement account. It will gain from $1,000 to $1,600, $1,633 over a period of about 6 years, 5 years and change. And then you see where the high risk assets go. And if you put $1,000 in what they call the Magnificent Seven, which are a bunch of tech stocks, they're at $3,877 today from their same index start point. They're well over 2 times the growth that you get in a 401k. And they are more than 3 times, coming up on 4 times. It's like 3.5 times the growth rate that you'd have for keeping savings. So speculation is rewarded, but you can only speculate it if you actually have the money to do so. And most people are not in that position. The reason many people feel dollar squeezed is because the dollar doesn't go as far as you do. This may be the single most nasty thing that all of us have experienced and not everybody has looked at and gone like, okay, well, that's why. Check this graph out on the screen. If you guys are just watching, if you're just listening, Spotify, check it out. Look on YouTube or Rumble as well. If you had $100 in 2021, you lost 20% of the value. It's worth $80 by 2026. That's the blue line that you see right here, okay? Here's our blue line that runs lowest. So from 21 to 26, we've seen the biggest drop in the dollar value. But just imagine everyone listening to this podcast, I think the lowest average age or the lowest sort of age bracket that has any people in it are 28 years old. So 28-year-olds, you do the math on it. I'll tell you this. I was already an adult making decisions in 2012 on my own. That was like, I'd already served in the military and had a whole like goofy, second adolescence. So let's do that in order, because it's been an increasingly useless dollar. The value of the dollar has been declining aggressively my entire adult life, as far as I can tell. $100 in 2012 runs down here. You're at about $94 by 2017. So you lost, 6%, 7%. Then you go to the next 5-year period, 2017 to 2022. And your $100 was worth about $86. You lost 14% then. And the last 5 years, you've lost 20%. Now, each one of those things stacks. So if you were to take it, that my $100 that I had in 2012 was now only worth $94. I'm at $94 in 2017, and I'm going to lose 14% of that. Going to take me down about another, $17, something like that. So now I'm I'm in the 80s. Maybe I'm in the high 70s. And then that 70s is going to have a 20% drop where I'm going to lose another 14 or 15% or $15 then at that point. So now we're $60. So I've lost 40% of my value in a period of 15 years? These numbers are really, really damning. And young people coming in, trying to put some savings away, are recognizing that, my savings is worth less than it was. My buying power is smaller than it ever was. And it's actually snowballing at a faster and faster rate. A couple of people here that they quoted. You guys can read those. Rising costs everywhere. The grocery store thing's pretty interesting. Donald Trump campaigned on affordability. This is going from March of 2025 to the end of February of this year. Orange juice, more expensive by about 28%. Beef, more expensive by about 15%, and it climbed every single month. Chicken, more expensive. Bread roughly kind of washes out, and milk about the same, kind of stagnant. So it went from the high under Biden to the high under Trump. It hasn't really changed. Eggs, though, have dropped dramatically. There's a 35% drop in the cost of eggs. So if you only ate eggs, you'd be okay. But you start looking at beef and chicken and the other proteins that people want to eat. They've all gotten more expensive since Trump's been in. And they were all getting more expensive under the previous guy. And so there's more and more of the same. And again, the dollar is worth less, which is part of it. Housing market is pretty damning as well. 2017, they're showing you the median home sales price. Again, this has to do with the value of the dollar going down, but the median sales price is basically increased. Now, the utility of a house is the same. And in theory, we should have better workers. We have a bunch of illegals who should be working for less. Shouldn't that all make it less? No, there's pressure on there. The dollar's worth less. And so rather than see the median household income, which is saying here's 2017 to 2026, the dollar amount that you may earn has grown very, very minimally. And the amount that you'd have to spend on housing to buy a home, that American dream of a home and a white picket fence in the front yard where your kids can play and all that, in a safe neighborhood, all of that is way worse by a lot. From 250 to like 425 is what it looks like here if I'm eyeballing these figures. This article is so damning as a picture, not of just Donald Trump's America, because it's not that. It's the reason why people resonated with a MAGA type movement. It's the reason that people wanted to see America great again, is so that they could be proud of their country, grow their cultural heritage, think that America is the best, exceptionalist, and then actually go out there and you have people that are less aggressive with people coming to their country when they think that their country has room to absorb them. We're not there right now. Here's your electric bills from January of 24 going to January of 26. And while you have minor fluctuations, a little bit up, a little bit down, the trend line is dramatically increasing all the time since Donald Trump got into office. But that's not something that's new. They didn't go back far enough, but you can see the trend line for Biden. It's still from January of 24 to January of 25 when he was in. Biden's line is the same as Trump's line. Maybe it's a slightly steeper line right now, but it doesn't mean that it didn't get all of its momentum under the previous. So it's not one guy that's going to take blame for it. I don't like the idea that we think that the president is uniquely responsible for the economy. There's nowhere in the Constitution that says that, but gosh darn it. You can see that affordability is absolutely destructive. And then your last thing is unemployment and whether or not people are getting paid. And the deportation requirement, the need to get people out of here, it theoretically would open up to jobs, would it not? And what you've heard the Trump administration say, we're still going to take on 600,000 Chinese students. We're still going to make sure that we allow H-1B visa programs for all the places that we need to. We're going to keep the illegals on board for things like farming and for working in restaurants and for hospitality and people who are running hotels and so on. Like, we need to make sure that those places don't tank because he's got some vested interest in that, it seems like. The trend line of unemployment is also really bad. It dipped briefly. This unemployment dip is the response after the recovery from COVID. So let's be real transparent about it. It wasn't because there was some great thing that was going on, but the US in general, we saw lower unemployment by about 15% as people went back to work, as their jobs were allowed to go back to work. You guys can remember the economy shut down in 2020. It really didn't get its footing started until the beginning of 2022. And so here's your beginning of 2022, and you start seeing the line go down. I was not allowed to go into work until March 4th of 2022. I'll remember very specifically. The next day was the State of the Union. And so the Biden administration started releasing some of the aggressive COVID requirements and sort of softening up their take on it. And that's when you started seeing the economy come back. And then as it normalized to what it was, like maybe a little bit closer to pre-COVID, then you ended up starting getting your problems again as all that stuff caught up with us, and inflation and illegal aliens coming in and the way they did. Awful, absolutely awful. So here you are with higher unemployment. Your money's worth less, your housing costs more, and people are having a harder time getting into a gainful employment. And meanwhile, the people who are speculating on tech stocks and things are making more money. And somebody just took $1.5 billion out of the oil futures market because they had some inside information. And people are fleecing the poly market because when people start getting desperate, they start making bets. How many things have you seen as a premise to a movie or a TV show or a morality tale going back 50 years about a down on his luck, fill in the blank guy who gets the quote unquote sure thing and decides to go bet on it and loses everything and has a mobster coming after him? It doesn't matter what the genre is. There are endless examples throughout Hollywood and literature of somebody makes a bet because they're down on their luck, they're backed up against the wall, and they think their only option out is that because there is no other. And they forgo maybe the hardworking example. Now take away the possibility that hard work is going to get you where you want to go. And you end up in a really, really scary scenario, which is quite sad. Let's go back to the article real quick. Job openings nationwide are falling. So you're seeing unemployment going up, but the number of openings are closed. Companies are going out of business. People are unable to maintain. Where is it hiring? Healthcare, where the government basically steps in and subsidizes aggressively. It's pretty interesting to see where jobs are growing. Jobs added in the last 12 months. Again, this is an outstanding article done by NBC, and I think we should just acknowledge it for what it is. Education and health services, 658,000 jobs added. Both of those, health services and education, are governmental. That is a completely unsustainable thing to do. Leisure and hospitality for the people that are making money, 126,000 jobs. Other services, 62,000 unknown. Construction, 42,000. We're losing in mining. We're losing in financial activities as AI comes in and does that. The information game, 64,000 jobs lost in there. They're not adding them. That's AI as well. Professional and business services, AI, 88,000. Manufacturing, 98,000. Automation is going to step in a big way. Trade, transportation, and utilities, 194,000 as more of those become automated and they become, the market and the industry changes. Pretty wild. There's more and more. The number of people that feel good about what's going on in our economy is a shockingly small number of people that think it's excellent. And interestingly enough, a lot of those people who have the most amount of money in the K-shaped economy, where the rich get richer and the people who are struggling either stay the same or get worse, those people are not the ones that are around Donald Trump. He's got a cabinet full of billionaires and philanderers and people that are not regular people. And maybe that's why he ends up saying awful things about people that worked in his cabinet that were, in fact, regular people, that were relatively blue collar compared to what you saw out of the Scott Bessents and the Howard Lutnick's types. I got a video clip of something that just shows you how out of touch someone can be. And it really personally pisses me off to see a man with a ton of power that's been divorced, twice? As far as I can tell, it sounds like he's cheated on every one of his wives, to go out there and make a claim against somebody else's wife when two men, one of them was Tom Massey, the other is Joe Kent, both are widowers, men who outlived their wives, different scenarios, situations, who remarried, which is not a dishonorable thing in any culture that I'm aware of. And then Donald Trump is going to throw shade on them for that in front of the national press. I'm also hearing him repeat himself, and it sounds like his slipping, grasp on what's going on is less and less impressive. His verbal jujitsu is low. He's just like an insult dog, but it's not funny anymore. So when I point out that I'm frustrated with this stuff and I see this, part of it is because the promises are not being kept. And maybe part of it is because you have this sort of tacky, classless thing without the payoffs. I made a tweet the other day that I think I still stand by. The gas is not cheaper and the tweets aren't that mean. They're predictable and boring. If you were doing novel cuts on people that were really doing evil stuff, we'd go, yeah, that's fine. We like that. If you followed your domestic agenda and things were more affordable, whether or not you're the guy who can do it, you're the one who promised to, not me. Okay. But if you're just going to go out there and try to savage people who are honorable, who have put more on the line than any member of the Trump family that I can tell. Is there any history of service outside of Donald Trump making billions of dollars in America and then going into the presidency and also walking away with more billions of dollars? Guys, do you not see that they took $2.5 billion out of a crypto coin that essentially abused all the poor people that are in Memphis that watch Fox News and were like, I'm going to get a gold IRA, I'm going to get a reverse home mortgage, and I'm going to buy a bunch of Trump cryptocurrency. And the rug pulling nature of that family is pretty disgusting to watch. And I don't know who was involved in that $1.5 billion speculation that took place yesterday, but somebody in that orbit did, and they thought it was fine. And I would expect to see zero coverage in the mainstream, especially on the right leaning. And I'll also expect to see nobody held accountable for it. I bet you nobody goes to jail for that. You think they're even allowed to open an investigation into it? Meanwhile, we're going to make fun of Joe Kent's remarriage after 4.5 years because his wife was killed in a terrorist attack. It is awfully tacky and classless to pull this, and he says it over and over again. I'll let you guys listen.
Mr. President, do you know whether Joe Kent was leaking?
Look, I'm not a fan of the guy. If you look at, and you never cover this, if you look at his truths or whatever he went on, if it's X or truth, if you look at his truths or his statements, he was all for everything. All of a sudden, he wasn't. He was a man that I met at Dover. He came and his wife was killed. He remarried fairly quickly. His wife was killed, and I felt badly for him. He ran for Congress, he lost. He ran for Congress again, and he lost. I said, you know, he's a guy, nice guy, seemed like a very nice guy. I met him, he was pretty heartbroken, but I said, you know, it's a shame. He ran for Congress twice. Call him up, give him a job in the White House. Smart. They gave him a job in the White House, and this is what he does to me, you know? Being a nice guy doesn't pay off too much.
Mr. President.
Think of it. He loses twice.
That's a hell of a statement. Being a nice guy doesn't pay off too much. So don't be a nice guy. It's literally the opposite of what the values of this country were about. But he's saying it out loud. He's telling you what it is. I'm sure he believes it. I'm sure he means it. I got no doubt. How gross. A guy who's cheated on his pregnant wife, his third wife, divorced the other two, has been basically a playboy and kind of like a sexual scumbag for a very long time. And I don't think I'm stepping out of line saying that. You guys can agree or not, but go back and look at it. The press is pretty obvious, the way that he's comported himself. He wasn't pretending to be some virtuous dude. To go out there and call out someone getting married in America, and he wasn't nice to me. I don't like the guy. You know what the question was, by the way? Do you know what the freaking question was? Did he leak information? So how about that? Did Joe Kent leak information about classified information going on in the background, or the stuff that he was privy to, in the way that we think that there was probably a leak about that $1.5 billion speculation that was done and the huge bet against the oil market? Somebody leaked that. Somebody took that information and parlayed it into a ton of money. So the question then is, let's go to the guy, the original question. Forget about the marriages. Forget about how tacky he is. Again, he's tacked Tom Massey for the same thing. He got married a year later. I won't take marriage tips, advice, or criticism from Donald Trump ever. If anybody takes that seriously, there's something real sick and wrong with your head. How about Mark Levin? He did an interview. He invited Joe Kent on. He spent 20 minutes hyping himself up so he could be fully worked up by the time Kent got on the air with him. And here's what he did. His first question was, are you a leaker? And that's the question that Donald Trump couldn't answer. Let's do it. Let's hear what the answer is to that simple question.
Were you a leaker? Are you under investigation? Do you know whether you're under investigation? Let's try and clear the air right at the beginning.
Sure, Mark. Thanks for having me on. I never leaked any classified information. And the stories you're reading are stories from leakers who are leaking, I guess, maybe an investigation about me being a leaker. So I think it's just a media counter narrative. I had
so nobody has contacted you from Justice or the FBI or anything like that?
Nope.
Did you ever leak? Confident? Let me do it this way. Did you ever leak classified information? You said no. Did you ever leak confidential information?
Nope.
Never.
Never.
Were you cut out? Okay, you're on the record. That's perfectly fine. And that's a good thing, Joe.
You're on the record. And that's a good thing, Joe. You're talking to a man who is more masculine in his freaking pinky toe than Mark Levin has ever been in his whole life. Mark Levin, who thinks that you should go enlist and join the military. Joe Kent, who actually did. Mark Levin's son has not, by the way. Mark Levin's son is like a producer for Levin TV. Looks like a nice kid. I don't know if he's straight. It's amazing to see that. The question is real simple. You know what's funny? When you have somebody who's never held a security clearance but talks all day long about things that they don't understand. It's turned out we've gotten Dan Bongino into that space of late, and so we'll cover that real quickly too, because there's a pretty funny here. I'll put it on the screen. This is from Raw Story. Pedophile protector. Ex-cop gets into Dan Bongino's face over the Epstein probe and its failures. We talked about it briefly yesterday and what it said and what we thought we were getting versus what we got. Mark Levin wanted to go out there and clarify. He said, were you ever a leaker? He goes, nope. Real simple. Then he goes, did you ever leak classified information? What Mark Levin doesn't understand is that classified is not a classification. When you asked, did you leak classified information? Joe Kent, who had a background understanding security clearances, who's had a security clearance for probably like close to 3 decades, it means the 3 levels of classification. We covered the executive order the other day. You guys can go back and watch a show last week if you want to hear it and the breakdown of the executive order, which changed in 2009 under Obama. But it's very simple. Like, it's always been the same. There are 3 levels of classification. 1 is confidential. So you'll notice that he said, did you leak classified material? Did you leak confidential material? That's the same question to Joe Kent, who's smarter than Mark Levin, turns out. Confidential, secret, top secret. Those are your 3 levels. Those are classified materials. Now, what he's asking is, did you share things that we would otherwise say are non-public information or privileged? But there's no classification for non-privileged. They actually do have some additional, like what are called access controls for things that are unclassified, law enforcement sensitive, for official use only. But the problem is that Joe Kent was the director of NCTC. He was a director. So that means that he had access to declassify things that even came out of his own space if he wanted to. You guys may not know this about Joe Kent if you haven't heard his background before. I'll let him say it himself. Guys at the Ranger Battalion, pretty serious place to be. People who work in special forces. It turns out there's a certain amount of capabilities you have, some understanding of how things work, how to shade the gray areas for sure. The special forces like mindset is very much about, if you aren't cheating, you aren't trying. But there's hard letter things that you can't do. You can't break laws if you're going to get caught doing them. So I would say, just a speculation here, having listened to his background, I'll let you hear it, from himself. If you don't know how to get away with something, then you're the fool. And he spent over 2 decades, coming up on 3 decades of time learning how to operate in that gray space. You think he's going to get tripped up by Mark Levin, some half-ass, like useless wannabe attorney that just screeches on the radio? Here's Joe Kent's background.
Certainly. So I would say, yeah, my views did change. Being the director of the National Counterterrorism Center is probably the most senior rank I've held in the government. Prior to that, I was an operational guy. I enlisted in the Army at age 18, worked my way up from being a private to being a sergeant first class, and then became a warrant officer. So most of my time was deployed downrange at the operational level. In the CIA, I was a paramilitary ops officer. Again, fairly low level. So I viewed Israel as a tactically impressive intelligence service, tactically impressive military, and knew that we got intelligence from them. They were easy to work with in terms of they speak English and they're very similar to us. In the region, there can be some challenging partners just with cultural differences in terms of day-to-day functions. And so I kind of had that view. I'd say about halfway through the war on terror, I just started reading more broadly, hey, how the heck did we get to this place? Because post 9/11, I was a true believer. I thought we needed to basically go to war with, any place in the Middle East that, my government sent me. Halfway through or so, I got a little disillusioned and felt that we were lied to with Iraq. So I did look into and read a little bit about the Israeli lobby. Read the case that Merschmeyer and Waltz laid out as well. And so that was kind of in the back of my head. But in general, I still thought that they were pretty decent partners. And look, I still to this day, I think that Israel can be a decent partner to America if we get our priorities straight. Coming into this role and being at the senior levels, and also before I was confirmed as the director of the National Counterterrorism Center, I had the opportunity and the honor of serving as DNI Gabbard's chief of staff, and I also led her beachhead team and landing team. So prior to the transition and during the transition, prior to her being confirmed, so I kind of got to do a lot of different things in ODNI and be a part of a lot of decisions being made. And the way I saw members of the Israeli government come in and deal with us at that senior level and the level of access that they had, especially in the lead up to the 12-day war, that opened up my eyes. And a lot of what Merschmeyer and Waltz had said over the years was kind of ringing in my ears of the amount of influence that they had. And then seeing the way that and I talk about this in my letter, especially in this last iteration of the war, where there was a concerted effort between members of the Israeli government, officially and unofficially, but then also echoed by the Israeli lobby here in America. And another thing I definitely have to hit on is running for Congress twice. I didn't take a ton of, I think I had 1 or 2 donors who may have donated through AIPAC to my campaign, But going and having to talk to AIPAC donors, I realized how powerful they were. And I never fully said, like, I'll do whatever you guys say. So I never got a ton of money from them. But seeing it from the candidate side, just how much money could be available to you if you were willing to make those relationships was also eye-opening. Because again, had I not run for Congress and had to go talk to donors, and then had I not been at the most senior levels of government, I don't know if I would come to the position that I'm in right now. However, if you look at...
So there's just a little brief rundown. He openly acknowledges sort of, you notice he says a sort of low-level operational guy. So that's one view. And his information, and he's talking specifically, he's telling you his background because it's in relation to this sort of like question about Israel. Okay, fine. So you're a low-level guy, you're an operational guy, you recognize the capabilities, the tactics, you understand, like there's no animosity there. And then he started moving into more aggressive roles, the candidate role when he was running for Congress. You hear a little bit about that. And then you move into the other pieces and you hear some of the stuff. What he didn't really touch on after his special forces time, he also went into a tier 1 unit. Can we acknowledge what that means? The amount of selection that goes in to be on Task Force Orange or what's called ISA. Guys, go read about it yourself. Go look at information or the intelligence support activity, aka the activity. Go look them up. Their selection is crazy hard. The stuff they do is like what you would think Jason Bourne does from the movies. It's wild. I mean, it's a wild mission set, overthrowing governments from the inside and so on. You're going to think that guy who knows how to go on deniable operations overseas is going to somehow get jammed up, like leaking, and that the FBI is going to catch up to him? I already know a little bit more about this story, which I'm not going to be able to say yet because it's not my part of the story, but I'm hearing what's going on in the background. The investigation, the leak was the result. The entirety of the leak, that he was a leaker, that was the attempt. And for those people that are out there parroting that talking point, who have never held a security clearance, who have never done an investigation, who have zero idea who's involved in what's going on, who doesn't know the backstory and how far back it goes and what it was going, what was happening at the time, it's really embarrassing. Will any of those people, eat the humble pie that comes their way when it comes up? They should. I don't necessarily think they will. I want to play you the crash out, sort of the epic crash out from a guy who really isn't fit to lace the boots on that man. Remember what Dan Bongino's background was, because he's out there talking about it. We showed you the Raw story, which is kind of funny. He did get confronted by Ivan Raglan, who I'm not a big fan of. He got confronted by a cop. He made some pretty pathetic statements about how go out there and volunteer. Like, nobody gets to volunteer and become the deputy director of the FBI any more than you could volunteer and become the chief of staff at ODNI or volunteer and become the director of NCTC. You kind of have to be in a specific position. You have to have access, and people have to look at you and decide that you're the guy for that job. It turns out if you have principles and you want to leave it and you get slandered and someone starts talking about your wife, it kind of tells me a lot more about the people that made those decisions than the guy who decided to walk away. And I'm going to default say that somebody who makes a hard decision, if you think that it was a good, like, financial or career decision for Joe Kent to step up and say, I can't stand behind this and I'm going to step out and here's what I see and I hope that Donald Trump fixes this. There's no upside for him in this. This is why Mark Wayne Mullin was able to get a very simple and easy confirmation. He's not a threat to the machine. You want to be a threat to the machine? Step out and say the machine is doing something that's illegal, immoral, unethical, unscrupulous, and see how they come after you. You can see how this guy comes after you.
Joe's a liar. Joe's full of shit. Joe's just making that up.
When you have the 18 intelligence agencies saying without a doubt that Iran is not working towards a nuclear weapon, and the Defense Intelligence Agency doing battle damage assessment, which is what the DIA really specializes in, is having these military-based assessments, that's what I'm going to go with. Being influenced by the IAEA or by another government, Israel in this case, saying like, oh no, even though you conducted Midnight Hammer and your 18 intelligence agencies say that their nuclear capability is gone, they're still somehow digging out from the rubble, and they're going to be able to assemble 10 bombs in 2 weeks. Again, sorry, I'm going with with what the director of national intelligence said, and she's saying that based on the research and the analysis and the rigorous debate of 18 intelligence agencies.
That is factually incorrect. Kent is lying to your face. Matter of fact, just before we came on the air, it's a little over a minute, this clip, but it's worth your time. Donald Trump was asked about Joe Kent's ridiculous claims that the Iranians who maintain 440 kilograms of 60% enriched material, they don't need 60% for anything but one single purpose. What do you think it is? Nuclear medicine? No, it's a nuclear bomb. When the record comes out and shows over time conclusively Joe Kent is lying about everything, Charlie Kirk, Butler, Iran, President Trump. The people who hate the Jews don't care because he slipped in there like, oh, the Israelis did it.
Veto protector, crash out, emotional. Everything that guy is doing right now. Sorry, you want me to trust the deputy director of the FBI who didn't even know what the FBI was, went into that job for 9-10 months, and he knows more than a guy that spent 3 decades with a TS clearance, worked at every level operationally, all the way up to the DNI, which runs the 18 intelligence agencies, of which the FBI is a component underneath it, and then ran NCTC as a director. The deputy of the FBI who quit and went out there and said there was nothing there at Butler. I would have told you if there was. Epstein killed himself. There's nothing more to that story after years of claiming otherwise. That guy? It's pretty impressive. It does show you that when you hero worship, you're going to end up on the wrong side of something. And if you blindly say something and then live alternatively to it, nobody cares if you are a bad person, you advocate bad things, and you do bad things. We're just like, okay, we don't want to associate with you. The problem comes when you promise something good and you can't live up to it. I don't think people are mad at Donald Trump for what he promised. I think they're mad at the hypocrisy that he said it and then he says, you can't notice that I'm not doing it. Same thing with Dan Bongino. Years and years. I know the solution to the problem. How are these people so dumb? And then turns out it's like, well, okay, now you got a choice. What are you going to do? He screams at it. Go volunteer. You go do it. It's like, guy, that's not it. Let's see if I actually grabbed that. I think I grabbed that clip. Maybe I did not. Here's him kind of crashing out on the same sort of thing. And the reason I'm pointing it out is because Bongino is a perfect example of big talk, no follow through. And he's much more accessible now that he's not part of the government. And you can see how much it eats at him. And so the pre FBI time and the post FBI time, the amount of emotionality of it, the amount of known hypocrisy and on the defensive all the time. He's out there like slandering Joe Kent. He's a liar. What's his proof? More, just trust me, bro. When it all comes out, you'll know that I'm correct. It's like, okay, well, your argument is the same as his, except he was in a position to know more. Let's just evaluate it evenly. Director level access, deputy director of one agency that answers to that director. Chief of staff for ODNI, guy who works for a guy who has to answer to ODNI on that stuff. This is really simple. And your answer still is just secret knowledge, just trust me, bro, while calling out people for their secret knowledge game. It's all about whether or not you have the most credibility. And the problem is that you said things and then you didn't live up to them. So you end up with this pedo protector story where people are going that. Do I think Dan Bongino is protecting pedophiles? I don't, actually. If you guys want to know, I think this story is totally unfair. I think that Dan Bongino got played by an agency that plays people for a living. And it's a game that people like Joe Kent know more about than Dan ever would, because he worked for the CIA and he knows what they do. And he worked in intelligence on the ground when he was working at ISA, Task Force Orange, whatever you want to call it. How about that? We could be honest about it and say that he didn't go out there and do something like intentionally. And at the same time, we can also say that like he understands that his credibility is shot. And so now he's just like attacking everybody. Again, just like the Muslim world and Tucker Carlson's assessment of it. When you're confident that you have the goods, you don't have to get emotional. You can take it in stride. I can have a hit piece reporter call me up and ask me things that might be really offensive. Did you shoot at a guy? It's like, dude, you have no idea what you're talking about. I'm not even mad at you. I'm embarrassed for you. Or you can act like this. This is not a person who's confident that he knows what's right.
Do you dipwads even read your own headlines? Are you that stupid? These are these media morons. People who've never spent a day wearing a badge, never kicked in a door, never arrested some child predator or some bank robber or some gang member. These morons don't know anything about the safety status of the country.
And also, as Secretary Rubio said, there was no imminent threat coming from Iran against the Americans.
Well, he corrected that.
There was an imminent threat coming from the Israelis who were going to attack. But that's actually the truth.
Okay, hold on. We're going to do it. We're going to do it honestly, one point at a time.
Had observed, the Iranians had observed an escalation ladder. They hadn't attacked us under President Trump.
Can you do me a favor? And I don't mean to be rude. Can you talk a little more slowly? I'm having trouble hearing. Take your time. Go ahead.
Sure. When President Trump came into office, the Iranians knew that President Trump wanted to get a deal. They observed the escalatory ladder very carefully. They stopped having our proxies attack us like they were attacking us under the Biden administration. And they got to the negotiating table with us about the nuclear agenda. When the 12-day war kicked off and the Israelis started that, the Iranians still didn't attack us.
All right. We have to take a break. I'm going to circle back on some of your comments here, and then I have some other questions. I appreciate you being here. We'll be right back.
Two people who are not confident. When you have to use a derailing tactic, when you have to go in there, it's not good radio. It's not good interviewing. It's not good or it's not compelling content to constantly interrupt your desk. Hold on. Say it slower. I'm having trouble following you. It's like, that's a you problem. The man is perfectly calm, saying things in a calm way, an articulate and organized thought. Mark Levin, he interrupts it. Dan Bongino, he does insults. He's like the Triumph the insult dog, which is not even funny because it's not a roast. Do you know the right way you would do that? You'd say, listen, I want to ask you about the following things, and I'll give you a couple seconds to organize your thoughts on it. We're coming up on a hard break right now. And on the other end of it, let's get into this thing. I don't want to short circuit you. There's all kinds of ways you could have done that properly. You could have given him a heads up that there's a certain number of seconds that you can do it. Or you could say in a short way, can you sum up the overall thing? And I want to get it on the other side of a break. We're going to talk about it. No. He says, can you slow down? I'm having trouble following you. And he just keeps interrupting and interrupting. This is what that interview was with Mark Levin. He hyped himself up. He brought on a guy that was calm, cool, collected, shared information unemotionally. And you got somebody that was like pushing him back against it. In the same way you see Dan Bongino do it. I'll listen to a articulate professional that has no emotional involvement every day, 10 times out of 10, out of the guy that needs to go out there and attack you, needs to interrupt you, that can't let you have a flow of thought. Because all it shows me is that they need to use tactics because the facts are not on their side. It's really easy. When you ask somebody a question and, what's your experience with interviewing, Seraphin? It's like, I don't know. I used to interview people as a paramedic because we would get their medical information. Do you know what the best way to get their medical information is? Ask a question and let them tell you stuff. You learn things just like a detective. And then I did it when I was at the FBI. Now I do it here. On occasion, when we have somebody on, you guys will notice my interview style is not to go and tell them what I think or tell them how to say it. I ask the question, I let them say it. The audience is smart enough to make up their own mind. If you're concerned that your audience is going to sympathize, empathize, or otherwise fully understand the position that the guest is coming from because you're adversarial to their position, then the only thing you can use are tactics and techniques. You're going to go out there and you're going to try to jam them up. You're going to try to stop them. You're going to try to cut up the flow. You're going to try to derail them from their train of thought. You're going to try to interject. All of those things were used by Mark Levin during that. All of them. That insulting game where you just like yell at somebody and tell them that, all your negative thoughts. It's transparent for those of us that know what it looks like. And it's kind of embarrassing. All right. There was a video that went out. This is the video, the pedophile protector bit where Dan Bongino was involved. I'm going to play that real quickly. This is another person sort of fallen from grace. I'm going to give a quick response to that. You heard Dan say, go out there and volunteer. You've never carried a badge. The problem is there's plenty of people. There's 1 million sworn officers right now today who've carried a badge. He's talking about Joe Kent, who's legitimately kicked some doors. Doesn't matter where you want to figure out where it was in any one of his parts of his history. You can't make those claims, which is credentialism. Like, these people don't know nothing about nothing, It's like you were a cop for a couple years, sure. You worked at the FBI for 9 months. You were at the Secret Service where you did executive protection. And then you were in media for 13 years and stepped away from government. You're going to go after somebody who spent 3 decades holding a security clearance and being the pointy end of the spikes that the United States foreign policy executes. You're going to try to tell an actual cop who actually spent twice as much time. I would say it takes probably 4 years for most people to really get their feet under them in any given agency. It took me about 2 years to understand how much I hated what the FBI did in the intelligence world. And then I got to go spend 3 years being a surveillance guy. And it took me about 18 months in the surveillance to really feel like I really had my feet under, where I was really professional at it. That was when I started doing team lead stuff and taking over and running the mission sets on our own and trying to come up with the best operational ways to actually implement the tools we had. It takes a little bit of time. If you're just getting your feet under you in one specific setting, and by the way, I would say that I'm above average when it comes to like what I can understand and my processing ability. I saw a lot of my colleagues that didn't figure it out until they were probably 4, 5, 6 years deep, and then they immediately became supervisors. It's pretty interesting. Again, here's the story that we're dealing with here. This pedophile protector thing, which again, I don't think it's a fair assessment of Dan Bongino. He went out and claimed that these guys like ganged up on him and were all buddies and they're political operatives. That was his kind of pushback on it. And here's the guy. Here's the former cop who went out there and interrupted him. And we'll just see what we think. I'm not going to interrupt. I'm going to let him say it in his own words. You guys can make your own decision about what that interaction looked like.
So I'm the guy that confronted Dan Bongino the other day on video. And I would like to clear a couple things up. Number one, I am not a political operative that works with Michael Flynn or even Ivan Raiklin. I just met Ivan that night for the first time. So this wasn't some organized event that we were trying to sabotage MAGA. It was organic, and I was speaking from the heart and what a lot of Americans want to say to Prakash Patel and Dan Bongino, that we believed in you, we thought you were going to do a good job, and it turns out that you're running cover for elite pedophiles, rich elite pedophiles. I'm not okay with it. You have not been held accountable since, and you're making AI memes of us, which I'm laughing at. I'm sending them to my family. Everyone's laughing. You're making AI memes instead of addressing the issue that you campaigned, or not campaigned, but you, on your podcast for years, were talking about Epstein and pedophilia, and now suddenly the files don't exist. And all this, then they do suddenly. They exist. Afterwards, they do exist. So I have a problem with that, with lying to the public about things that we know are true, about rich elite people having sex and killing kids. But you're telling us to forget about it. But no, we're not going to. And someone gave me your number. I tried to call and text you, and you kept saying it wasn't you. But I know it was you. And yeah, let's have a civil discussion instead of making AI memes. Stop dodging accountability. Got it. You're a pedophile protector. A pedophile protector. Pedophile protector. I was a cop for 9 years. You're a pedophile protector, faggot. You're a pedophile protector. Fuck you, dude. Fuck you.
So that was the video. That's what it looked like. Not particularly mature on either end, to be fair. That's not the way you do confrontations per se. But is that really the way that you'd respond if somebody came up and said that to you and you know you hadn't done anything wrong, or you hadn't you weren't worried about losing your audience or your livelihood because of this stuff? If somebody comes up and says that something goofy like that to me, somebody comes up and makes an allegation about me, it doesn't even hit me. You're not even talking about me. You don't know who I am. You don't know anything about what's going on. Dan Bongino should be the same way. It's not that hard. He's been doing this for a long time. It's not like he's new to having scrutiny. It's interesting that he's got freaking sheriff's departments there acting as bodyguards. That's kind of interesting. Now, Ivan Raiklin, who's a former Green Beret as well, you know, he's a professional troll at what he does. He's very good at it. He's gotten people, you know, law enforcement and other guys, but they all seem like they're kind of people who have done the wrong thing. And they all seem like they're actually not really good at handling scrutiny. Whether it's the Michael Fanone types, whether it's Dan Bongino, whether it's going after prosecutors. Think about when he went after Jocelyn Ballantine. Do you guys remember that? Because we played it on this show. She's the prosecutor that went after some of the Proud Boys. She's involved now. She's not supposed to be, but she's involved in the Brian Cole case, which we've talked about at the beginning of this program. Ivan Raiklin also like stalked her down, DOJ prosecutor, and made some allegations to her. And she was fairly polite. She owned it. She just was like, yeah, you're saying these things. I know who you are. I'm going to be walking to my car. I'm not answering your questions. Thanks for being here. That's how you handle it when you're a pro and you're not worried. Jocelyn Ballantine is not going anywhere. She's safe in her job at DOJ, and she knows it. And she thinks she did the right thing. She's not the villain in her story. The reactions of the Dan Bonginos, the Michael Fanones, the people that have been like needed at. There are things that really, really get me going. It's almost always, it's a lie about my family. But if you want to come up to me and make allegations that I did something that I didn't, and I know I didn't, you're not going to hurt my feelings. You're not going to get underneath my skin for that. It's like, who the hell are you? You think that you know something because you watched it online or you read something on Twitter? Dan's reaction is outsized and it's inappropriate. And it's a person who doesn't feel like he's in the right. And he feels like he's losing credibility, traction, etc. So you'll see these stories. Now, this is a goofy left-wing article, raw story. But having an ex-cop come in and claim something, what that cop is saying is that we outsourced a lot of hope to you and you let us down. The pedophile protector bit doesn't have to be literally true. It's you said something and you didn't live up to it. He might as well just be saying, you're a hypocrite. You said one thing, you did another, and we're really disappointed in you. Just think about that anytime too. And by the way, if you did that with your kids, you know, like you don't tell your kids that you're mad at them. You tell them that you're disappointed in their decision making. That's what Dan is experiencing right now. It's the grown-up version of, I'm not mad at you. I'm disappointed. How many of you are in that? I'm disappointed in Dan Bongino. I went on record a year ago, almost to the day, and I said, if he's successful at the FBI and de-weaponized this, as listed in Donald Trump's Agenda 47, if he de-weaponized the agency that I worked at, he'd be doing penance for anything he ever did that was wrong. And it turns out he didn't. He went in there and he just, lurked, spent 9 months there, didn't accomplish anything. For anyone to understand, when he goes in and says, go out there and volunteer, I want you to understand that you cannot volunteer to go work in a position like Dan Bongino did at the FBI. And more importantly, if you did volunteer even to work at a low-level position in the FBI, the hiring process to be onboarded as an employee would take longer than 9 months to just get in the door. It would take longer for you to want to go work there and get a job there than it took for Dan Bongino to quit. So you guys should understand that. And for all you that are in the chat right now, and I see you saying that you're furious and all this other kind of stuff, I get it. I understand. I understand where that instinct comes from. That's the first instinct. And as it settles in with you, you realize, why am I angry? Why am I disappointed? Why am I disillusioned? And all of those things come from expectations not being realized. It comes from disappointment. That's where it comes from. That's why your father, your mother whispered in your ear, I'm disappointed, is way more powerful than them screaming at you because you harden your heart. When someone tells you, I had an expectation, I thought better of you, and then you let me down, that stings way more. And that's what you're seeing, that outsized emotional counter reaction. Because nobody wants to accept, like, I did the thing wrong. It was my own fault. It was within my control. And I didn't live up to it. So again, I don't think he protected pedophiles for its own sake. I think he found himself unequal to a task that he thought he was going to be able to dominate at. Because he'd been bullshitting people for a really, really long time. And people believed him. And unfortunately, they put hope in him. Because that's what you do. You hope that someone is going to come in and fix the problem. Americans love the idea that you're going to solve the problem because you said you're going to do it. Then I don't have to solve the problem. But we're not voting our way out of this. That's what I'm seeing. As I sit here, the number of comments I get, well, what's the solution? The solution, my friends, is very simple. The first of the 4 F's that I will tell you is faith, because you don't have the power to fix this country. You can't. It's going to take something that's much bigger. This is a God problem now. It is a God level problem. Man individually will not fix it, not on his own volition. We've already seen this. The second one, what is it? Faith and then family. You do have impact on that. You can, in fact, make your family better. It's the reason why I drove out here. It's not very fun to drive for 16 hours with a 2-year-old, but we did it. And the reason we did it is because it's important for me to spend time with family, to come back to this place where we started, where this whole journey began. So that's why I'm sitting here in this room. The third is fitness. You do have control over your own fitness. The way that you prep your body and your mind to be able to deal with the next problem, you have abilities to do that. So you can control the things that you can. This is like the St. Francis of Assisi, the serenity prayer. They teach it to alcoholics, right? The things that are within your power to change, you can change them. So you can change your fitness. You can work on your family. And lastly, your firearm skills, because that's the way you protect yourself from the outside evil. And that's it. It's very limited. That's the nice thing. It's liberating to realize that you have no ability to fix this country. I have no ability. I'm sitting here staring at a webcam or a small camera system. I've got a couple of screens in front of me with some stories that people are out there saying. There's some people with much bigger voices. There's some people with smaller voices, and every one of them acting as though they have the answer or that they somehow are going to be able to fix it with the words they say, being a cheerleader or being a detractor from the regime. None of those things are. All I'm doing is I'm helping to inform people, I hope, make you a little bit more skeptical about the things that you hear. And then at the end of all of it, you go out there and you look at the 4 F's, because those are the things that are within your power. You can worship, you can work on your family, your fitness, your firearms, farming. Somebody said fettuccine. Good for you guys. That's funny. Yeah. You can control the food that you put into your body, but we don't have that much power in this world. And recognizing you don't, by the way, that is the brilliance, which Tucker Carlson didn't call out in that clip, but that's the brilliance of Christianity. That the game is, it's not being fought for this time in this world. You do the best you can in this world, and the reward is somewhere else. If you're a Christian, that's what you believe. That you don't have to win here. In fact, that the man who came perfectly to the world died for it. And so how much better is your life going to be? Maybe it'll be really charmed and you'll be able to live in a great space. Or maybe you'll go through a lot of suffering and we might be in a time of tribulation. That's okay too, it turns out. So for whatever it's worth, the solution is probably outside of your grasp. It's certainly outside of my grasp. I am humble enough to know that. I can't fix it. And I know that there are things inside government that I can't do, and there's things that I could do. I can make great recommendations, but I don't want to necessarily be the guy to go out and do it because it doesn't seem like it's even worth my time. I'd rather spend the time with my 4 F's. And none of those involve government, it turns out. None of them involve serving in a crappy, evil place. I already did 5 years in DC. That was my penance. It was enough. Dan Bongino didn't even make it freaking 9 months in Washington, DC. And I did it for 5 years. So take that for whatever it's worth. My friend Phil Kennedy did it for 15. And he still hangs out there. There are politicians that spend time there. It turns out I think that place changes you more than you change it. That's what I've seen. So, all right. We're gonna wrap it up with the thoughts about money, about the K-shaped economy, and people that are pushing back. This actually, I think, is very encouraging, and then I'm going to give you a warning too. I told you I would give you 2 palate cleansers, so I'm going to bring them to you. This one is a woman who was offered $26 million for her farm. She is not a particularly attractive lady. She's not necessarily the most well-spoken lady, but man, God bless her. I wish more people had an opportunity to look out there and see the long-term gain of holding on to their holdings and not throwing them out to AI or data companies or big developers and turning their ranches and their farms and the things that their family grew up on for 100 years. I wish that people had that connection. There's something really special about what this lady has to say, and you can tell that the person who's interviewing her doesn't get it and thinks that she's a stupid rube. She's going to end up being the smartest person in this interaction. If someone's willing to buy all of your land for $26 million at 10x what it's worth, they actually just told you what it's worth. And also, a little bit less AI would be great. So here's a really interesting sort of news story about a woman who's holding on to property, which is probably one of the most, that's the farming piece, right? Of our F's, it's the 5th F.
If it's my way, I'll stay and hold and feed a nation. 26 million doesn't mean anything.
Some people might find it hard to understand how Delcia Bear can turn away a $26 million offer to buy some of her land until you spend a little time with her walking the dirt road she grew up on and in the house her daddy built.
My grandfather and great-grandfather and a whole bunch of family has all lived here for years, paid taxes on it, fed a nation off of it, even raised wheat through the Depression and kept the bread lines up in the United States of America when people didn't have anything else.
Delcia is one of dozens of landowners approached by an anonymous buyer, one of the major players in artificial intelligence, likely Google or Meta or Amazon, to purchase their land. The market value for land in Mason County is about $6,000 an acre. The realtor that came to her door last April offered her and her mother about 10 times that.
They call us old stupid farmers, but we're not. We know whenever our food is disappearing, our lands are disappearing, and we don't have any water and poison, we know we've had it.
Delcia's mom, Ida Huddleston, is now 82 years old. She says she does not need the money or the hassle. She was born on this land and she plans to die here, and she certainly does not trust the promises made by the AI companies or the people who want them to build here.
So what do you say to the people who are in town that say, hey, this is going to bring jobs, this is going to bring economic prosperity?
I say they're a liar and the truth ain't in them, is what I say. It's a scam.
For Delcia, scam or not, she says she's connected to her home like Scarlett O'Hara was in Gone with the Wind.
As long as she was attached to that land, her spirit never would die. And that's the exact same thing for me right here. As long as I'm on this land, as long as it's feeding me, as long as it's taking care of me, there's nothing that can destroy me if I've got this land.
That's a hell of a comment, isn't it? Someone offers you $26 million. You live in a house that was built 100 years ago by your grandfather, and it looks like it's falling apart around her. And she says, go take a hike and get the hell out. I mean, that's the story that you heard about Americans forever. All of you in the chat are rightly calling out the danger, which is that eminent domain and government overreach are going to come in and take it away, which is the real enemy. And in theory, if we were people who actually were, quote unquote, conservative and we believed in that and small government was the answer is that it's hers. How on earth would a government come in and try to take it? And we should be defending land rights and property rights and individual civil liberties. And I don't think our government's doing that right now. I don't think the people that are running it at the federal level, at the state level, or at the local level are looking at that, because they're looking at, oh, what's the greatest good? How can we get the most number of people into those lines working? What about jobs? What about pride and having some longevity and a little bit of forethought, that if you gave up all the lands that are growing freaking cattle and farming wheat to data centers, eventually we're going to be freaking replaced by machines, which is exactly what we saw in that story that NBC did. Again, that'll be the first one in the comments. Pretty interesting. And then here's where that grows out of. All that AI data capability, it turns into the surveillance state, which is something that Dan Bongino used to talk about. You guys, I did a whole movie about the police state and government overreach and surveillance. And that guy went in there knowing what he knew, having done the movie that we did, having talked about it and running his yap about it. And then what did they do? Campaign for more FISA, justified and defended the same agency that he made millions in a movie calling out, because none of these damn people have principles. Here's where the thing goes. I talked about this with one of my parents' neighbors the other day, the flock cameras. If you guys are not familiar with the network of cameras that are all around the country that are watching you and all the things and all the capabilities they give to hackers and scammers and frauds and all the other kind of stuff, those open source databases that we talk about when we advertise for Patriot Protect, who's sponsoring this program, this should probably scare the living crap out of you. And this is what that woman is holding back by keeping her cows running on that land.
A few weeks ago, using a commercial search engine, I very easily found the administration interfaces for dozens of flock safety cameras. I shared this information with 404 Media, and with John Gaines' help, that number quickly grew to nearly 70. None of the data or video footage was encrypted. There was no username or password required. These were all completely public-facing for the world to see, and some of them still are. You don't have to be an expert to find and gain access to this. You don't even have to type anything in to see every single person, vehicle, and activity that took place in these locations in the last 31 days. Whether you wanted to watch this footage live in real time or look at footage from a month ago, you could just point and click your way to it like you were watching Netflix. You could even open up the live streams in VLC or cast it to a television. Making any modification to the cameras is illegal, so I didn't do this, but I had the ability to delete any of the video footage or evidence by simply pressing a button. I could see the paths where all of the evidence files were located on the file system, and I could see their hashes and signatures. Some of the devices we saw were the familiar-looking Falcon cameras that you see all over the country, but the majority of these were Flock's new Condor cameras, which are designed to detect and track people. They're PTZ cameras, meaning pan, tilt, zoom, and they quite literally use AI to zoom in and follow you around whether you're a person of interest or not. In just the time that it took to count and verify these vulnerabilities, I saw a family in North Carolina load their infant and a bunch of merchandise in a Lowe's parking lot. And I suppose one could cross-reference their license plate with the Park Mobile data breach and find out exactly where the garage is that will store these new fancy tools. I watched a man leave his house in the morning in New York. I watched a woman jogging alone on a forest trail in Georgia. This trail had multiple cameras, and I could watch a man rollerblade and then take a break to watch rollerblading videos on his phone. How? Because the camera's AI automatically zoomed in on it. Just like it zoomed in on a couple arguing at a street market in Atlanta. So what? They're still anonymous, right? No, they're not. Within 2 minutes of open source intelligence using a commercial facial recognition engine, I found out that one of them just finished medical school and the other is dealing with chronic irritable bowel syndrome. The couple also just had a baby last year and they have a pretty concerning debt-to-income ratio. I also know that they drove over 45 minutes from their address in the suburbs to attend church in Atlanta that morning, and then they checked out this market and bought a sweater. I watched a lawn.
I'm going to cut away from that. I'll post it over on Locals. If you guys want to see it, it's a 5-minute video. It should scare the living crap out of you. The fluency in AI and the ability to use open source to be able to find information on people, it's actually really concerning. It's the reason why people like Steve Baker and Joe Hanneman are able to do the thing they did that we talked about, the Pipebomber case, and why so much of the stuff is so easily debunkable in the public sphere, because a lot of this stuff is so available to regular people. If you just have the wherewithal to look for it and you understand how these things work. There's a story on Axios, which I'll include as well, Behind the Curtain, America's Next Class War, is about AI fluency, the ability to use the tools that currently exist right now to be able to manipulate things like that. And they're out there. And if you can leverage them and you can find things on social media and you can go out there and stitch together the story. I have FBI agents who are currently working for the FBI who ask me when someone says something nasty to me. I had someone say something nasty to me on Twitter, and it was particularly nasty. And I went and I sent him a picture from inside of his own house, which I found on Realtor.com, because I was able to take information from his username and then link that back to an Instagram account. The Instagram account showed some interior footage. I went and dug up the address through some tax records, which was owned by his mother. And I sent him a message that said something like, "Your mom wouldn't like you playing with the sword in the hallway," and sent him a picture of him in the hallway at the address and sent him a picture of his own balcony. Guys, that's just easy stuff. That's open source. I didn't learn that in the FBI. I learned that because I have an ability to look at technology. And that's going to be out there in the world right now for a lot of you. In any case, that's what that woman is holding back by keeping her cows running on that land, is less of this crap. I don't necessarily want to live in the world that I'm living in where we can do all that stuff. And there's plenty of open space in the world to go out there and get away from all that. So the more we're seeing that, the better we are. I'll take 100 of the lady with the big wart on her forehead who keeps her cows running. I'll take them as neighbors every day. And I'd rather live in a place full of that, a community of those, versus a community of Dan Bonginos or Mark Wayne Mullin or whatever the hell else politicians we find. And I'll take 1,000,000 Joe Kents over any Mark Levin's or Bonginos as well, or Donald Trump's. That's just my take on it. It's just the way that I feel about this world. I'm not constantly doom and gloom, but I am disappointed in my fellow man when I see it, because it's kind of sad to see what people will do. And I think people have probably always done that. They've always moved forward. It's just not necessarily great. It's not necessarily progress. Progress isn't necessarily mean that it's moving towards something better. That's today's program. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you learned something out of it. I hope you will comment and tell me what you did or didn't take away. Where you disagree with me, that's fine too. Jump in with my buddy Steve Friend if you're watching over on Rumble. The American Radicals podcast will be going in about 15 minutes, so you guys can watch that. I'm sure our chat will jump in with it. And we'll see you again tomorrow. It's 0930 on the East Coast. That makes it 8:30 in Texas. It's 6:30 in the morning here in Arizona. It's a freaking early morning, but I'm willing to get up and be with you guys, and I appreciate you guys being with me. So thanks for joining the program. God bless you. We'll see you guys on the other end.
Thanks for listening to the Kyle Seraphin Show, streamed live weekdays on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Follow Kyle on Twitter, Truth Social, and Instagram @Kyle Seraphin.